Welcome to our Japanese style living environment webinar series. Today we'll be in conversation with Kathy Shaner about her traditional apprenticeship in Japan and becoming a bonsai master. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to our partners who made this programming possible. The Japan Foundation Center for Global Partnership for funding and the Oakland Fukuoka Sister City Association for production. My name's Peter Boyer, your moderator. I'm pleased to introduce Kathy Shaner. Kathy will tell the story of her first year of a 5-year traditional apprenticeship in Japan, living and working with Yasuo Mitsuya, his family, and other apprentices. And she'll share her discovery and pursuit of the Japanese art of bonsai all the way to the top of that field, from novice to master. Kathy became the first Japan certified bonsai master from outside of Japan and the first female bonsai master in the world. Her journey continues as she proceeds to travel widely, teaching her own students and working on public and private bonsai collections in the years that followed. Kathy is the curator and artistic director of the Golden State Bonsai Federation's Bonsai Garden at Lake Merritt in Oakland, California, USA. It preserves outstanding bonsai and suiseki for everyone's enjoyment. Created and now tended by volunteers under Kathy's guidance, it is a new model of mastery through service learning.
Okay.
Okay, is this in the picture?
Maybe so. Alrighty, everybody. Good morning. It's Sunday, the 19th of July, and this is the maiden voyage for the Japanese style living environment webinar series. And guess what? We're all learning in the new virtual reality here. So we're off to a late start. It's just a couple of minutes. My name is Peter Boyer. I'm a member of the Oakland Fukuoka Sister City Association, which is producing this webinar with funding from the Japan Foundation. So we got lots of friends. I'm also a past member of the steering committee for the Bonsai Garden at Lake Merritt, where we're broadcasting from. And I'm a member of another number of other voluntary organizations through which I've met most of our speakers in the Greater Webinar series. We have 6 webinars scheduled at the moment, and you've all seen the list, so I won't bother rehearsing that. Why a series on the Japanese style living environment, and why at this time? A lot of things are suddenly up for grabs. You know, we're in a state of flux thanks to COVID-19 and other crises that preceded it. And it's a good time. Everyone's rethinking, how do we get into this pickle, and how are we going to rearrange our lives and our societies? And what better time than to look to other societies for ideas and inspirations. So this is what we have to offer. Hundreds of years ago in the nation of Japan, they had big cities and they had big city problems, and they evolved ways to cope. And they weren't the only ones. This goes on all over the world. And that's what we're going to explore in the Japanese style living environment series, a way to make modern urban life livable, to make it conducive to living a whole and satisfying human life with, like with relationships with your fellow persons and with your environment. So we have I think, a worldwide audience for these questions. But in particular, most of today's audience will be drawn from a number of already organized peoples. The Sister Cities International, of which Oakland Fukuoka Sister City is a member, is an organization that promotes world peace through mutual understanding and appreciation. This is cross-cultural diplomacy on a citizen-to-citizen level. And everyone in the Japan-USA Sister Cities network has received an invitation, and I hope you're here. And those of you who don't know anything about a sister city organization, the #1 activity is usually sending young people overseas and hosting young people from overseas so that we get to know each other's cultures. And this is what generates mutual understanding and appreciation. And it was former General and President Dwight Eisenhower's idea to maybe prevent the next World War through this kind of citizen-to-citizen connection. And in times like these, I think we need it, because tensions are arising. We're also drawing from a large audience of Japanese living environment enthusiasts. Many of you already subscribe to Sukiya Living magazine. And I want to give credit where credit's due. It is Sukiya Living magazine that's been promoting the concept of the Japanese style living environment, which they call the Sukiya style living environment. And if you want to know what that word means, you better subscribe. They'll explain it. And we're also welcome to members of the greater bonsai community throughout the United States and perhaps beyond. I want to thank Bonsai Clubs International, based out of Rochester, New York, for promoting these events, and also the Golden State Bonsai Federation. So welcome you all, and you're going to come up in a bit during the program. And beyond that, there are other affiliated organizations, such as the one that got me involved in the very first place as a volunteer, both here at the Bonsai Garden and other public Japanese gardens. That happens to be my profession. So that's why, and that's who we're starting with. And you all already have an interest in this sort of thing. But I hope by the end of this series that you've all, that we've all had the kind of conversation that's prepared every one of us to go out and share the fruits of this, to take what people in Japan figured out as they arranged their living environments and apply it in your own community, your own nation, and maybe worldwide, and see if it makes a difference, makes modern life more livable and perhaps more sustainable. So why and where does an apprenticeship experience in Japan fit in with the Japanese style living environment? I thought about this, and I decided that this really ought to be where we start. Our speaker today is Kathy Shaner, and as you'll hear shortly, she underwent an apprenticeship experience in Japan. More than that, she moved there. She lived there with a Japanese family. She worked as an apprentice under, that family. So she had to learn the language, the customs, the manners, everything. She had to adapt to an entirely new environment. So if she can do it, we can do it. So without further ado, one of Kathy's colleagues and students, Mr. Robert Gould, is going to introduce today's presenter, Kathy Shaner.
Thank you, Peter. My name is Bob Gould, and I have the privilege of introducing Kathy Shaner today. Certainly a privilege to introduce someone who is the first person outside of Japan to be named a bonsai master. Wow, this is amazing. That makes her the first person, the first female inside or outside of Japan to be named a bonsai master. This has taken her back to the United States, and she has in fact taught bonsai and demonstrated bonsai throughout the United States, and made the United States actually a contributor to the bonsai hobby, if you would, and in some cases the ability to buy and sell this material throughout the United States. So it is quite a coming there. I didn't really know Kathy that well before she went to the United States, but I did have the opportunity to join a class with her after she returned to the United States. And it was at that time that I learned what a marvelous artist she is. She has a tremendous artistic ability that has been something that has been very evident throughout the United States, but more so here at the Bonsai Garden at Lake Merritt. We have a collection of donated trees that Kathy has in fact been the curator of for over 20 years. The trees show it. We have one of the better bonsai collections outside of Japan and maybe throughout the world that is absolutely amazing. So with our curator to handle that, it's a very positive thing for me to introduce Kathy Shaner. Kathy, where are you?
Well, thank you. This is going to be wonderful. I actually had a chance to revisit my initial trip. By that, I mean by what I wrote. I did not take a whole lot of time to reread what was initially put in words. As I decided, my husband was actually living in this country at the time. He was very generous about, yes, go, go, go. It was only going to be for a year. I had my way with that, but we'll discuss that later. But I loved bonsai. I'd only been in it for 4 years prior to going over. I fell into it head and heels and toppled several times and picked myself up, and that was it. I never stopped running. I think when you find a passion, something that really suits you and that you can pass on to someone else, you've found something that you can be happy with and make a lot of other people very happy and aware of things that they didn't know they don't see in nature. So many people look at trees and all they see are trees. They see the mass of them. They don't see the individual personalities. It's like looking at a person. When you look at a person, everybody has a different way of walking, talking, holding themselves, different clothes they like to wear, what they do with their hair. And it's that whole body that gives you that intense pleasure when you get to meet somebody who's very different. It works well for me, and I assume it works well with many other people. It's hard when you're sitting at home during times like this, but even during these times, we've found a way to communicate and become even stronger in our friendships with one another. Well, it was the same in Japan. When I bubbled my way in, I had asked a few times something about it. I heard, there were people over there that studied. It was early on. And I asked a few of my teacher students that had come over and worked. And my teacher had come over multiple times in my first early years. They were, about 3.5 years prior to going over. And I took classes from everyone I could take classes from. I watched everything I could go to, and it was just a marvelous time for me over here. And then one day, I don't know what happened, but I said something to Hideko Metaxas, who was a big, I guess, supporter. Whether she was the one that initiated some of this talk. I was secretary of the corresponding secretary of the federation at the time, the state federation for bonsai. If you're going to go do something, you just got to get out and do it, because the more people you hear about, the more people you find out about, the more information you can get from them, the stronger your hobby or what may become your vocation will be. It's just something we do. We don't just sit around and, oh, that's nice, and then walk off somewhere else and treat our whole life that way. So I've always gone gung-ho into things, started off with dog shows, but we won't get there. It was a great life, and having to change. I was 40 when I went to Japan. I wasn't a young teeny bopper. I was a big teeny bopper. I had put on a lot of weight. I don't think I've lost it since. But it was something I was desperate to learn more about. I took a lot of classes over here. Just a brief background. I'm a little overdoer in certain ways. I took classes from everybody I could find, upstate, downstate, from LA to San Francisco to Sacramento. When people would come to town, when our conventions were there, I would make sure I took classes from them, learned from them, looked at, watched what they were doing. We had our teachers, and the one I ended up studying with would come to this country, and he would go throughout California to all the different clubs and work with them, teaching them what to do. There were other students of his, one other student for sure, that came over and is now living here and has moved to Atlanta. Kenji Miyata was Mr. Mitsuya's first student. But getting back, it was an exceptional time period, I guess. They were open to bringing this information to us. It was no longer a secret to be hidden. And the people that came over early on were very gracious in what they gave us, the information and how they opened it up to us. So I just knew, one, after going to different club meetings and different areas where my teacher had come over and started showing people what to do, I would just follow them around. I was a camp follower. And I tried to do what I could do. You know, if something dirty on the floor, I'd pick it up. If there was something around, I took care of it. I was always doing something. When one of his, not apprentice, but a friend who had apprenticed with someone else who lived nearby, when he came over, I did the same thing. And he went back and talked to Mr. Mitsuya and said, hey, this gal over there is, you know. So you've got to do things. If you want to get somewhere, people have to know that you're really interested, and you'll give anything you can give to get there. Well, almost anything. But it, I don't go there. It's an exploring that some of us, I guess, as Americans, you know, we all came from different places, our families, you know, we're from all over the world. So we're used to exploring and going away, and we came from the family lines that did that. So I guess I'm right in that same zone. So I ended up, as I mentioned, doing things at different workshops, sifting soils, building them, showing other people how to do it. So the person that had come over from Japan could work with somebody instead of doing the physical work himself. So as I went to each location, and I can't follow her again, I just ran around this country of California, and saw what needed to be done, and I did it. So the word got back, hey, there's this big gal that, you know, she likes to do lots of stuff, and she's gung-ho and whatever. So my teacher during one of his trips came back again and didn't say anything to me, but I think Hideko Metaxas had something to do with it. Actually, I know she did. And had kind of worked on talking to different people. We went to the first World Bonsai Convention in Omiya, and that was my first trip to Japan. And that was in 89, the beginning of 89, which is the year I started in Japan. Going to that convention, I helped other people. I took a class. I couldn't keep the trees. This class I took, because they could not be taken out of the country or shipped into our country. So I gave them to a group of gals who were watching the presentation, and they had a class that was coming up at their own school. So I gave them my tree for them to work with because I could not take them home. So I ended up getting my picture taken with them in a row, and I went into the Japanese magazines. And then I went back home because somewhere during that, well, I don't know how much of this I should say, but at that convention, the first World Bonsai Convention, my Hideko was there, and I just said something to her. Have you talked to anybody yet to see if there's any way I could get an apprenticeship? And Mr. Mitsuya happened to be the one she was honing in on. He had just finished his home. He had a brand new home that was built, a huge place. So there would have been room for somebody, which I didn't realize at the time. And he said he talked with her and then sat down at lunch, and she came up to me at lunchtime about 30 minutes later, and she said, "You've been accepted." And I said, "Accepted?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "By who?" And she pointed to him, and he was about 4 rows down from me on the center aisle, eating his food, and it was Mr. Mitsuya. And if there was any person that I wanted to go with, it was that man. He was delightful. I had not met his wife yet or known anything about her. And she is an absolute sweetheart. She's a good sister as far as I'm concerned. So is the rest of the family. So that started it. And I said yes. And through Hideko, I didn't know a blip of Japanese at the time. It was, when do I go? And he said, "Oh, in 2 weeks." And I said, "Well, the tour's not over yet in 2 weeks, and I have to go home and I have to get things set up for my husband." And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm giving him all these excuses for not, but I truly could not get there. I found out I had to have some surgery, which I took care of, and then finally came over. And that's where we begin. The Japanese apprenticeship is, we could say torture. In some places it is. They can be very, very hard on you. But what they're doing is building up your spirit. So you can take anything you need to take. Because there are some clients out there who are very difficult. And you have to understand how to work with them and how to ignore some of the angst that you feel while you're working on their trees, especially in front of them, because they will nitpick everything and they'll be at your ear screaming and yelling and different things. But we had a good time other than that. So this is the first 6 months or 5.5 months of my trip in Japan. Obviously, I'm not going to give you the whole 5 years. After a while, towards the end, I did very little writing. I stayed up late at night and got up early in the morning and did a lot of writing. I was in essence writing things so my husband could share what was happening. And then I would, every couple weeks, send him an envelope. Unbeknownst to me, later on, he was passing it on to Nina Regal in Southern California, who was the secretary of the Golden Statements. And that was our state bonsai booklet that would go around. I think it was 6 times a year at that point. So she was starting to put my information that I was sending to Alec as a Dear Alec letter to the general bonsai people. And I have no idea who received it, but they were happy about it. I just did not know it was happening. So we're going to start off with my introduction at the airport to Mr. Mitsuya. I knew him ahead of time. We had talked through the translator and different things, but this was first getting to know him. He came to the airport to pick me up at Nagoya, and you know, luggage, etc. And we were just driving home. It was late at night, and I'm going to start here. As we entered Toyohashi, the first English-speaking song of the evening played. He'd had his radio on the whole time, and it was just this gibberish that I couldn't understand. And then all of a sudden, there was something different that came about. So the first English-speaking song of the evening played, and it's called "This Isn't a Dream," and I'm truthfully saying that. And it was like, no, it isn't, you know. And then right after that, an old Beatles tune, "Help." And it was so much to what I felt at that time. I was panicking. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm really here. What am I going to do now? You know, I got myself into this. And the both of them were very appropriate. And then the next day I woke up at 5:15 with the birds, but stayed down until 6:45. You know, in the very, very beginning, we slept a little later. They had, again, this new home and lots of things that were going on, but they were exhausted from the convention that had been there and from all the work he was doing, moving in the new trees from the other location he'd lived in. And so I walked into all of this brand newness, how things were set up, etc. So I had not met anyone other than Mr. Mitsuya for the family until this time. Mrs. Mitsuya was home. She's a delightful person. She's every bit a sister. She's a great wit, hard worker, lovely lady, does bonsai right along with him, basically runs the place, but I wouldn't tell him that. And then he had two boys. One supposedly was taking English in school. He needed as much help with his English as I needed with my Japanese. And then the second son was also there, but they didn't get up until a little bit later. It was, but not by much, but they had gone to bed at 11:30 at night. They go out after regular school. This would have been on a Sunday night. They were still taking specialized classes so they could move ahead. In Japan, the school system is set up that if you get into the right kindergarten, you can get into the right first grade. If you get into the right first, second grade, you can get to the next better school. It's always about getting to the better school. And they have this huge system of teachers that will teach during the weekends and late at night. They were little kids and they were coming home at 10:30, 11:30 at night from these power courses that they were taking, and then go upstairs and their lights were on forever, finishing up the rest of their homework and studying. So the Japanese people in general are used to putting in horrendous hours on whatever they do. If you're going to do it, you do it right. You do the best you can all the way through, and you push and you work hard, and then you'll finally get what you need. But even at that point, you continue on. You never stop. So right from the beginning, I got the idea that this was going to be a very interesting time period. I like working hard, but there's a difference. We work hard but we also sit down and goof off a lot. Okay, so I woke up the next morning at 5:15 with the birds, but stayed down till 6:45. I didn't hear any noise in the house. I figured I'm not rocking any boats. Maybe they're all tired. I don't know. The breeze at that time was delightful. It blew through the room. Now this is June. So I have down that at the next morning I woke up. It was 81 degrees. And 63% humidity. So I always wrote down what the temperature humidity was. It was just my way of knowing what was happening. And again, this was meant to be a letter to my husband. And okay, so I woke up with birds, the rooms. Oh, then I started to realize what my room was. I left my Soji panels opened a little through the night along with the window. The room is a 6 mat size. I really like this type of floor. It's soft and resilient, easy to kneel on, etc. The framing shows, and the wood is beautiful. A very clear pine, which it was not a pine, it was cryptomeria, with a smooth texture and a matte finish. And the walls between the framing are stucco. It's smooth to the touch, but pockmarked throughout. It left a natural gray color, and let's see, then Mr. Mitsuya was already gone for the day, and I tried to communicate with Mrs. Mitsuya. Now, Mrs. Mitsuya had a very different language. She never, most of Japan speaks the Tokyo dialect. That's what they've been trained in school, so everyone can communicate with everyone. But Mrs. Mitsuya never really goes out that far from her own little 4-town quad area there. It was very difficult. Even the Japanese language, the little bit that I knew, her talking was very sing-songy and very different. So we did a lot of pointing and scratching and looking at things, and it worked, but it took a long time to really get into it. Then I asked if I could see the bonsai and the other trees, and I was misunderstood. But for the better, she asked if I wanted to help her work on them. Why look when you can do the work? You know. So I found myself in a wonderful workshop, and I'll describe it later. Anyway, it was black pine season, and what I didn't realize at the time, over here, if we wanted to work on a tree, we picked up a tree and we worked on it. Over there, there's a time to get certain things done, and that was pine season. So it meant pulling needles, cutting needles, doing all sorts of work that needs to be done on a black pine at that time, and then we went into white pines. So we would do just little things, what she could show me in the workshop, and we went from there. So I'm going to start picking up. I'm going to skip a fair amount of this, but I'm going to pick up on some of the fun and the interesting points and just make it amusing, because it was amusing to me in how people lived and how they run their lives and how different it was from over here. And I loved it. I loved every bit of it. Understand we have questions and answers. So if there's a time where you do have a question, I do. Oh, put your hand up.
No, raise the hand in the
Oh.
participant list, and you just raise your hand in that.
Oh, if you raise your hand in the participant list, it'll show and you'll know.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there is a bar in the bottom of your there should be a like raise hand, and oh, somebody's raising their hand. Pauline William.
Okay, Pauline.
Pauline, yes. And how do I do it now?
Click on her over here.
So this is just like starting in Japan. We're learning something new.
Yeah, does this bring back memories?
Oh boy, does it ever. Yeah. Like I said, I've never read this. I mean, I read it in the beginning and I was going to copy it over and do something.
Well, we should have covered this in the beginning.
What?
Folks, throughout the presentation, when Kathy hits transition time or she finishes a chapter, she may say any questions. Yeah, really, I know.
So shall we take Pauline's question right now?
Yes, you should. And so on your participant, your viewer, if you move your cursor towards the bottom of your screen, you'll see.
Me, or I know how to do it.
I'm talking to the audience. The audience screen is different than ours. On the bottom, you have some buttons you can push, and one of them is to raise your hand. And we see that. And don't worry, you've got a butcher ticket number. And when Kathy says, does anyone have any questions, you've got your place in queue, and then we'll just put you on live, just like any other call-in show.
Yes, it's going to be, Pauline has to ask to unmute. So Pauline, you have to unmute yourself on the lower left. There's a, oh, hi Pauline.
Hi.
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 I can hear you, but I don't know whether everybody else can hear you. What's your question?
I have no question. I was just checking to see if my system worked. I got a new computer.
Oh, okay. Your system works perfect. So
Yeah, sorry.
Pauline had a question, and it was just whether the system was working. So, okay. All right. Thank you.
I'll mute myself.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank
All right. Sorry about that.
All right, sorry for the interruption, folks. That's fine through. Kathy, this, I have to say, I was really struck how you got to Japan not by showing off or running to the front of the line ill-prepared, but by just being helpful.
Yeah,
So,
I was learning at the same time I was helping them. I wanted to know how to mix things. I started to mix soil or put things together. I said, me, I'll do it. So I would jump in, they'd give me a little hint what they wanted me to do, and I'd go ahead so they could continue working with the students over here, when they went to club meetings and things.
this wasn't advertised. You just.
That wasn't, well, see, I was secretary to the president of the federation, the Bonsai Federation, the state one. So I knew who was coming to town or who was going to what club and what was happening. So it was easy to get there. It was a time period. I wasn't working at the time. I mean, I'd work on and off, but it was a kind of an ownership with a company. And so I didn't have to be there. I would go to the clubs and I would follow these. I was a camp follower. I'm going to go wherever I can go to learn whatever I can learn this, because I really liked it. It just did something for me. I love working with plants anyway, gardening, just regular veggie garden things. So this was just another step in that way.
I'm reminded of the famous speech by John F. Kennedy where he said, ask not what your country can do for you or what your bonsai show can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Mm. And that seems to me that that was the exact process you underwent, and you saw a need and you filled it. And look where it got you.
I haven't had a day rest. And, well, except for that 2-week period when I flew back in here and I had self-quarantine.
Oh, there you go.
But I still got outside.
You're a pioneer in many ways.
Well, if you really want something, you don't sit back and wait for it. You just take the little bits that you can get, and finally they all add up and something may happen. It may not. But I just happened to be in the right place at the right time and did the right thing, I guess. And I've never looked back. I mean, my husband was extremely supportive. He was a great person that he was excited about this, that I could do something else that really pleasured me and would also help other people out. So I want everybody to know that everybody's got something to give, to help out with, even during this time period. I mean, you can wear your mask, you could, there are kids around that maybe their parents aren't home and you can help out a little bit. I make friends, I think a lot of people are making friends that they hadn't talked to before because they were always working and gone. And it's a great time to become friends. So anyway, we're going to go on here. I'll just keep reading, and if there's another break, we can get into it. I just want to give you a sense to what it was like in the beginning and different things. So I woke up the next morning at 5 o'clock. But I was out of bed by 5:15, and it was raining most of the night, a nice steady rain. So the rain continued. We went shopping and saw a lot of flooding. That was Mrs. Mitsuya, because Mr. Mitsuya was away. From the sounds that were made, I got the feeling this is not the normal rainstorm. The rivers are quite high, big muddy washes pouring down between houses, around trees, through gardens, etc. Didn't have my rain gauge out, so I don't know how much. I would think 4 to 5 inches. It was probably above that. Did not get to Nakata-san's, one of the places we were going, because of the mud conditions. So it's something to look forward to. I'll take anything. Now I'm the proud owner of my very white, shiny boots. Mrs. Mitsuya, they're plastic looking boots, and they come in pink and white and bright green colors and soft blues, everything you can think of. But mine were white, and of course we're working in mud all the time, so they didn't stay white too often, but they were nice. And I've been looking for another pair, but trying to find one in my size is impossible. Okay, so the better to walk in the mud with the white shiny boots, and a couple of pairs of the sandals worn around here, because you did not want to wear shoes in the workshop area. Because the workshop area had a dirt floor. It was a compacted dirt floor, and it was a lovely piece to work on. You don't have to worry about dropping your tools onto concrete and running them and all this other stuff. But and you could water the trees right there in place and not have to worry about it. So this was a fully contained, very large workshop space with a little tokonoma area and a raised area where the clients could come in. They could sit down on the tatami mats, and if it was winter, they could warm their hands over a little fire or whatever it was in the hibachi, and they could watch and look at their trees, which were lined up along the far wall. So you had this far wall, you had the area where we worked, and then this tatami matted, very elegant space. And it was just lovely. Again, I didn't see too many clients come in that would do that, but certainly closer to showtime, when the trees were set up and ready for show, they could come in and look at them and see if they were happy with the result or not before they went out. So getting used to that room was nice. So what does that do? Why are we wearing boots and why are we wearing sandals? Because we're on a dirt floor. And the next step up going into the hallway is the house. The house is part of this unit. So we would flip out of our shoes or boots, get into these little sandals that are soft on the floors, so there's no scratching. You don't ever wear regular shoes in the house. You wear slippers. Slippers are called a day. So you would get up, and the floors were very shiny, brand new wood, highly polished, very slippery, as I found out later. So the transition between the two, it was important to have something that could get muddy and be ugly and whatever, and then easy to flip out of. So the boots were kind of easy to flip out of. They had wider tops. Okay. So we're looking at all this rain that's going on while we're going shopping. The white shiny boots, the sandals, compliments of the Mitsuya. Very difficult to pay for anything. I also picked out a better dictionary, English Japanese. I tried to pay for it myself, but the book was taken out of my arms. It's been a good day. Mr. Mitsuya set up my work box. By the time we'd gotten back, everything was ready. Turntable, tools, and all, so I'm set. I tried some new foods, and of course I like them all, but I think I need to call it quits on the salted food. Everything over there was heavily salted, and it just was not, that was the one thing that I had a problem with. It was the soy sauce as well as the salts. And I never had trouble with swelling before, but my ankles are quite puffy. One looks like it did a few years ago when I was hit with a baseball bat. The other ankle isn't too far behind. Maybe I'll get some lemons and start drinking lemon water in the morning. So we watched a video of Mitsuya-san when he was in Chico 3 years earlier than that, which was surprising that he had that video disc. Or they weren't video discs at the time, they were tapes. We discussed the trees as it went along. He's not used to the quality, and I did that in parentheses because there is a difference between what I saw in Japan and what was over here. Some interesting comments, I won't go there. I actually wrote that down. Our dictionary talk is improving, translating and that. So I went on, and then we went, and I was really tired that night, and it was a good day of work all the way around. Worked on more outstanding black pines. The needle plucking was reduced to 3 or 4 top in the middle and 5 on the bottom. These are needles that we leave. Also, if the tree had any large, thick candles, I'm sure I am to make the cut up or cut the candle all the way off. So it was one direction or the other. If it was a weak candle, you would cut up and leave a few needles on it. If it was a really strong candle, you would end up cutting it back to the old needles. Sitting in a somewhat stooped position with your left arm in the air working out and holding the candles and while you're clipping and working on them, it really gives you one heck of a stiff neck doing this all day long, just top to bottom. You just keep working. When one tree's done, another one is right up there on your place and you get to it. Then more great food, but found one item I don't care for. Sticky, stringy, fermented soybeans. Yuck. It's called natto.
Yeah.
It's not my toe. Natto later became one of my favorite foods. I dearly love it. I could have it every day. I just miss it when I don't have it, and I haven't had it for a while. But it was definitely one of the required tastes that took a little while. So one of the things, you're going to see a little difference between what it's like here in this country and over there. And I found out shortly. Started out as a normal morning. Then the carpenters came. People in the US, especially workers, walk along at a slow pace, many times just enough to get by. Here everybody runs, workers too. They were odd jobs that needed to be done. New house, some things not working right. Also put in a very large tea table in the work area. The stump work from over the tree I was working on, I was able to watch them. The stump that they brought in was, I don't know, 2.5 feet, 3 feet across, and probably, I think it was 2 feet high, maybe not quite that high, maybe a little higher. But this huge tabletop of a thick piece of trunk that was cut through, just an absolutely marvelous piece. And that sat in the workshop, partially interrupting the quick runway going to the hallway. But it was there. I mean, it's still there as far as I know. It's just a lovely, lovely table. After lunch, I went with Mrs. Mitsuya to an exercise class. I sat on the side and watched. After 2.5 hours of exercises, they all formed small informal groups and circles and ate and drank tea and cake. At least ate and drank as much of the calories that they lost, they got back. I'm sure that worked out real well for them. I didn't quite understand that, but anyway. Now I'm going to go into clump talks. These are little bits and pieces that I thought were a little more interesting as far as what the country's like and what my time there was like. We went to Mr. Mitsuya's trees, are just outstanding. Mr. Mitsuya had left for what I believe to be the weekend, about 4 days, I think. And then salesmen would stop by. They'd see many bonsai people in the country. It wouldn't be long before others knew about me, the big American. At least I was able to work most of the day on the trees because I didn't understand what the salesmen were asking. They were talking to Mrs. Mitsuya, and all I needed to do was work, and that made me happy. There was rain. There was a lot of rain. It seemed this is a rainy time of the year for them. A lot of overcast, a lot of clouds, and that's summertime. And that kind of surprised me after living in California for so long. I mean, today we have fog, but they're not clouds, and most of the time it's pretty clear. You know, we hardly ever have more than one rain during the summer. So that was just kind of a surprise that it rained so much. And while I have a few minutes here, I'm going to explain a little bit about the meals. I thought I could easily lose weight while I was there, but I think I'm gaining. Breakfast is as large as anyone's dinner: meats, fish, eggs, soup, rice, wonderful variety dishes to pick out of, fruits, and sometimes noodles. All of the above most of the time. Then around 10 o'clock there is tea, with cakes, of course, and on to lunch. Lunch includes most of the items on the breakfast menu, but larger portions, lots of vegetables. Then around 3 there is tea and coffee with Japanese cookies or cakes. Dinner around 6, I'm already full just thinking about it. Curry rice tonight, oh, I could eat that. So you know, some things kind of surprised me because I understand why there's so many skinny apprentices around, because they're running, and I don't think they're fed quite the way they are at the Mitsuyas. Maybe so, but it was just amazing at how much food. It's almost like if you had more food, you could burn more calories, you could work faster. I don't know what it was about, but that or they liked looking at somebody that was really big. They kept getting bigger. So into another subject, we have the Japanese. Oh, we have question and answers.
Yeah,
We do have questions.
there's
Okay.
questions. So first I'm asking Joanne Lung. Yeah, so I don't know.
You're asking her to unmute herself.
Yeah, I'll unmute it. Hello, Joanne? Hello?
Hello,
Yes, you're on.
Joanne?
Yeah, you raised your hand.
Well, I didn't mean to be, so I'm going to mute.
Okay.
But I do have a question. I've had erratic reception. Is this being recorded, Kathy or Peter, so that it can be played back later?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to mute. Bye.
And then William, we had one from William. Hi, William.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
First, congratulations, Kathy, on all your accomplishments. I know it's a big sacrifice you made.
Go
So you can-
Bill.
It's
Yeah.
Bill.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for all your help. Question I have, did Mr. Mitsuya have more than black pines?
Did he have what?
Did he have
Other-
one with black
other
pine?
Oh,
species.
absolutely. It was just, this was black, when I first went over, it was black pine season.
Okay,
So, oh, he had a very nice variety of trees, yes. And most of the pines were clients' trees. They weren't all his trees. You know, a lot of clients' trees in the yard. So when it's black pine season, he would go out, pick up trees and haul them into the yard. And when they were finished, then he'd bring them back to the different clients. And that happened with a lot of different varieties of trees. It wasn't just pines, but that was pine season.
in your area, they specialized in pine. Did they have collected trees or nursery grown trees from seed?
Yes, both.
Okay, black and red.
He had, yes, there were some reds there.
Okay.
Not as many reds. They were more up in the mountains and things. But there were some good, really good red pines. But most, you know, he had a large area of trees, but there was always room for more to come in from the client's yard. It was easier sometimes to bring the trees to the house than to go to the client's yard and work.
Thank you very much.
5
Thank you.
5 questions. Oh, Peter has a question.
Oh,
This is Peter Boyer at the studio. I have a question for Kathy. Kathy, is learning to love natto metaphoric for your experience in Japan? Is this like learning to love the unfamiliar, or learning to love disciplined effort and learning to love repetitive tasks?
oh, absolutely. You know, it's nice. We're used to certain things over here and eating certain ways. And, you know, if you're going to learn what they have to give, I just felt after a while, okay, I've got to gut this down. I've got to put it in my mouth and swallow it. I've got to get past that taste. But after a while, it's just like learning, you know, it's like your hands. And my hands were bloody bleeding for a long time. Very raw. I talk a little bit about that down the line. But you get used to it and you phase it out. You just kind of push it off to the side. It doesn't matter. What you're doing to the tree matters. What's happening to you doesn't matter. And that's kind of the way everybody looks at it. You know, this needs to be done right. I'm putting all my soul into the tree. If I have to worry about this hurts, oh, that bothers me. I don't know if I'm going to work with pines anymore. Whatever the case may be, you have to understand that certain things are important to learn, and it doesn't matter what kind of pain, what you go through, you're going to be better because of it. And you just have to step out there and do it, you know, and that's all there is to it. I don't know. I mentioned some of the pain in here because it was part of it, you know, and you'll hear a little bit more on it as I go down.
There's a question from the audience. Besides the quality of your work and teaching, you are famous as being one of the few female bonsai. Just went away. Somebody else asked the question. You are famous as being one of the few female bonsai professionals in the US. Could you speak to your experience as a woman in the predominantly male bonsai community when you began? Have you seen a change as far as the presence of women in bonsai? Thanks, Shelley.
I think there are a lot of women out there that are doing a marvelous job, and we've had more and more that have come aboard that have studied and worked with other people, and I think that's great because it is a community. I mean, I watched Mrs. Mitsuya work, and she was no slouch. Let me tell you, she could rip through a tree like nobody could. I mean, she just kept going, and that was her husband's business, but it was her love and her passion too. She said so. She enjoys it, but she was a hard worker. So it doesn't matter what you're doing or how you're doing it. If you're going to do something, you do it right and you do it well and you do it with every little sense of your feeling, and your strength is put into it. But your strength comes not just from moving around, but it's the strength of what's in your head, what somebody has planted in there that you are then able to produce. So it's, I'm tickled that we have more women that are getting involved in it. You know, for a long time, it was always the wife just kind of supported what her husband did, and that was that, and she'd go do her own stuff. But if you love gardening and you love looking at nature and seeing things, you're going to want to get out there and touch it and feel it and go around with it. I grew up in a family that, you know, my dad came from Germany before the war, well, 10 years, I guess, before the war. And he got a house and, you know, started building his family. And we had veggies and we had fruits and berries and all sorts of things in our yard. It wasn't a green grass yard. There was a little bit just to make my mom happy, and she did her little flowers. but the rest was gardening. So we did that all the time. I'd climb trees. I mean, I love picking apples off the top of the tree and doing different things. You know, it was always in us as garden, getting your hands in that dirt. There was nothing more pleasurable than dipping your hands deep into the compost heap, you know, before Dad had a chance to flip it around and go over, because it was warm and moist and wonderful. And that love continued through. It's not just, okay, I like bonsai because I like whatever. My hands were prickled, they were raw, they were messy, but I felt it once in a while when I stopped working. But while I was working, you weren't paying attention to that. And if that may be one thing that stops some women, because they don't like getting their hands dirty and they don't like doing this and that, and it's sticky and the sap gets on you and then, you know, if that's the way you feel, it's fine. There are so many other things out there you can do. You may be somebody who supports a bonsai addict, and we are addicts, in a very big way. You know, and that might be, oh, look, I found this beautiful little accent plant. Is that something you can use or whatever? We look at plants, we do things. And Mrs. Mitsuya was just such a huge part of that. Okay, so when a show came, just to jump ahead a few years, when shows would come up, certain times of the year, she would look for accent plants, and she knew right where they were. They were under a bridge going down to the little river or stream that went, and we'd call it a river here, it was a stream there. But on this certain area, it was her zone. Don't anybody, make sure none of the neighbors get in there and do anything. She knew where the bulbs were, so she could get them when they were just starting to break through the ground, so you could put them in a pot and get them ready for kokofu as an accent plant. You know, she knew things. She was so much a part of that business that I figured, okay, that's why more than likely I was able to go there before I would have gone anywhere else. He accepted her as an equal to his work, that I just kind of fell right into it. And it was wonderful. I mean, to learn from both of them. You know, she had a different way of looking at things. She'd rush through things a little faster than I would have liked to have seen, because it, you know, a little sloppy around the edges, but not that bad. I mean, she knew what she was doing and she knew what she had to do. Some of the trees she was working on, and that what I thought fell through the cracks needed to fall through the cracks because they weren't of the quality that they needed, that excess time and refinement. They were just early. They were kids. They could learn a little bit. They could go ahead a little bit more, and she could move them ahead. So there was a nice relationship between them, the way they worked together and the way they worked with me. You know, when she was there, what she taught me, what he taught me was a little different. So I had to figure out, well, why is she telling me this and he's telling me that? Well, because they're different age trees, or they're a different type of a tree, and he wasn't always there to give you the information. Sometimes he just set the tree off to the side and say, okay, Dozo, you know. It's like, what? Okay, well, he's got the same kind of tree here that I'm working on here. It's a little smaller, a little taller, a little younger, whatever. So what do I do? You know, and then I'm watching him out of one corner, and I start doing whatever he's doing. Most of the time it was okay, because it was the beginning time, and anything I did was kind of okay. But when the second year came and the third year came, that okay was not as available as it had been. And I'm going to step ahead real quick. There are things I want you to hear in here that I'll talk about. But this one time, the second year started, and it was cryptomeria time. And they're a very tender tree, and there was a certain way that I'd worked on it the year before. It was fine. This is what he told me to do, so I did it. I just cleaned it up. I cut, I scissored, I did whatever. And then the second year came. I'm going to use this plant. I don't know. Can you see down here or up here?
Great, yes.
So if this is a juniper, but if it were a cryptomeria, when you're going in to work on a cryptomeria, you know, the needles are very tender and touchy, and they can turn colors quickly if you just bang them the wrong way or brush against them. And I wasn't too caring about that because he just said he wanted these certain things cleaned up. So here, if I set this down lower, is that
That's
okay?
fine.
Okay. So here I am, the second year, working on the same tree, one of them that I'd worked on the year before. And I put my hand in like this and I start doing what I need to do. And he came over and the next thing I knew, my hand was flying. I mean, he just knocked me out of there. And I said, what, you know, nani. So what did I do? I put my hand right back in the same place and started to work on the top again. And then it really got smacked. I'm surprised it didn't come out of my shoulder. Then he explained to me, I said, but that's what I did last year. Oh boy, just tell somebody, go back. Oh, I mean, I made a lot of mistakes. But you learn from them. Hopefully you're still alive. But he said, flat bottom of my hand, just like that. He said, done it, you know, hopeless. You can't let those bottom needles on the cryptomeria hit your hand. You've got to be able to get in there and not touch it. I said, but that's what I was doing last year. What, you know, boy, you know, don't say that to him. I did that last year, you know, so, and it was okay. Why is it? It's different. This is this year. That was last year. So then right away that told me, okay, this is a game changer. What I learned is not what I need to know. I need to know what's coming ahead. And I need to be watching him a little closer to notice all those little tiny differences. You know, it's not how it looks when you're done. If the tree is perfectly done and nice, I started looking at this tree and what I had done last year, I could see a lot of little yellow and orange spots through there that had been damaged. And I looked at the tree then that he had been working on, one of the trees, and there wasn't any damage on that tree. So I guess what he said was right. I better be doing what he's doing. I better be paying attention and really watching him. I was kind of watching him, but I wasn't seeing what he was doing. I was watching, and there's a difference. So after that, I really got a little better sense for what was to be done and why it was to be done that way, and to really pay attention to the boss. There was no question about it. Oh, I don't know. We don't break in Japan. They told me I could break, but you know, in Japan, we're supposed to keep going. That means you got to cross your legs out there, people, because I'm going to keep running. No, I'm only kidding. Okay, so do you want to take a few second break?
We should take a 5-minute break.
5-minute break.
Yeah, give people a chance to stretch and go to the bathroom and get a drink of water.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
Yeah. How many you got?
How many people? There's 65 of us. No, 61.
So we'll reconvene at 10 minutes past the hour.
So 11 and 10. 4
Pacific
minutes
time.
from here, Pacific
Okay.
time.
There's a few funny little things that
Sorry.
Yeah, so here we go. So I think you're back on.
Okay. So did we have other questions?
So
Somebody was,
there's a, please, if you have questions, just put them in the chat box. And then when there's a time that I can interrupt, I'll ask Kathy the questions. And there's some questions that have been sent to Peter in advance, and I hope that we'll get to them. And somebody wants to say hello. Kathy, no need to interrupt. I just want to say hello. And how much I enjoy seeing you here. Be safe and healthy, Marty. Klein.
oh, Marty Klein.
Yeah. So, and then hero means husband still can't eat natto after 16 years.
I just love it now. I mean, I go after it all the time.
We have natto that we can buy at Working Bowl, but
Yeah.
it's very, very, very mild natto.
Oh, Bill, I missed one.
Oh, really? Oh.
No, that's already, we already asked that question. So it's recording.
Okay, so are we ready to go?
Yep, ready to go.
Okay, what I'm gonna, do we have any questions at this moment or we're holding off?
There's nobody that
Okay.
has a question. For
So
me.
what I'm gonna do is I've cherry picked through here a little bit more. There were certain times, just to give you a feeling of what it was like over there, not just bonsai, but just day-to-day stuff, how I felt, what I was going through, and what I thought was a little more interesting. You know, I haven't read this thing. I started over there 31 years ago. So I never reread this until I had to set up for this piece, and it was fun going back because I'd forgotten so much. So it was good to revisit it. Anyway, Mr. Mitsuya had left for what I thought was going to be a weekend, and there were salesmen that stopped by. That's about where we left off last time. And there was a big steady wind and rain and stuff starting out, and then we went to the workshop. And so it was pretty early in the morning, but we had a few minutes, and I wanted to explain some meals. And I think we started a little bit above there on the meals. Had we talked about that? Yeah, I think so. Okay. If not, we'll get more meals later. To get to another subject, we have a long way to go if we want to play catch up with the Japanese. The children go to school 7 days a week. Saturday, almost a full day, and Sunday they don't leave until 10:30. Lucky, huh? All workers I've seen have one objective: to do the best job they can and do it quick. I think we're headed in the opposite direction over here. And I still feel that way. A typical day for me starts at 5 a.m. One of the two grandfathers, Mrs. Mitsuya's father, and I'm going to say this as I thought it was, not as it actually was. In the beginning, I didn't know who belonged to what. I didn't know the one father from the other father, Mr. Mitsuya's to Mrs. Mitsuya's. So I'm going to be talking about them upside down. So this one who lived in the room next to mine in the hallway I lived in was what I thought was Mrs. Mitsuya's father, one of the two grandfathers. I had birds. They are nightingales. This is what I thought. Collected from the wilds in the mountains. They are wonderful to listen to, which is good since they are right outside my door. In the morning, one bird has a very loud yell and it goes off at 5 o'clock. But I found myself up before then, just to save myself from popping up out of bed that quick. But if I would oversleep, my alarm is there. I put it around for about 45 minutes, dress, go to the bathroom, put my bedding away. You would take all your beddings, all your futons and all, and put them into the closet. And so the floor was nice and clean. And then you'd pull them out at night. It was a very different way of life, but I really enjoyed that part of it. So I just go to the bathroom and put my bedding away and then do miscellaneous things such as write in this book. study new words, etc. Then into the kitchen to boil water for 2 large pump thermoses from which we get our tea water throughout the day. By 6 o'clock, Mrs. Mitsuya has gotten up and she's in the bathroom emptying out the soaking tub. Most of the water is put in the washing machine and the morning clothes start soaking. It is put in the washing machine by dipping it out of the tub water from the night before, and that goes into the washing machine. And this is a very, it's a old-fashioned, I guess, type of washing machine. I actually enjoyed using it, except I thought it was a horrendous waste of water until I saw where she was taking the water from. May have to revisit eventually. So the washing machine it's like a little spin dryer. You throw all the stuff in here and it kind of thump, and then you move it over into the spin thing and it spins it out, and you put another load into the thing and it pump, and then you take it out and you spin it. Meanwhile, that other stuff is coming out, and then you start over. So that was just the beginning part, and then you've got to get all the soap out of it. So you put it back through some new fresh water then that is not coming necessarily from the tub, and it's taken care of and it goes through. So this is everyday washing. First thing in the morning, and you get it out and hang it up on the line. So we started in the beginning, we would both be taking the wash out. I'd be watching her and how she washed and then going out and helping her hang it up. If it was a rainy day, we went upstairs to the attic area, past the boys' rooms and into the eaves, and that's where we would hang the wash so it wasn't outside getting wet. There was no dryer. But it was a nice way to work, and it got you going. So as time went on, I learned how to cook in the kitchen, what she liked for breakfast, what needed to be done. So I would work in the kitchen and she would do the wash, and then sometimes we'd flip it out. She would work in the kitchen and I would put the wash out and do the wash and stuff. So it was nice, and I just felt like this woman works like a dog. I mean, she works from she's running from the minute she gets up until she goes to bed. And I wanted to do something for her. You know, I wasn't just learning from her husband, I was learning from her, but I also wanted to make her life a little bit easier. She didn't like it easy. So I don't know that I failed at that point, but I did what I could. So we, put our bedding away, we did the wash, we did different loads, we did the spin dryer bed, and then we, got into the bonsai work. By 7:30 or so, everybody's had their breakfast, dishes clean, wash hung up, trash out, and then we have time to sit and relax before 8. And that was it. There was no time after that. Then we started a little early the next day. Koji had to get off to school early by 6:30 instead of 8. The rest of the day went the same as the other days. Black pine work, my hands feel like hamburger and look like they've been hit with a meat tenderizer on the back. I believe a wonderful torture would be black pine needles under your cuticles and fingernails. It's enough to curl your toes. You can black out the pain, but once in a while a group of needles hit a very tender area, and if you had the time, your hand would recoil, but you keep working. There's no stopping. While we were talking hurt, another area of sore is in the neck and upper arm shoulder area, because we are holding our hands up. Now, there could be a big tree, but we're up in the air, away from all the other things. Even in the beginning, I did some of that, but I didn't know about the needle business. And you're holding your arms up. Well, from not doing that for so long, what they did, I'm going to turn around, and one of the students later on showed me a way to do it. You put your arms behind the chair and you pull far forward and stretch. So you're stretching all these muscles through here that are very tight from holding them close. I was really very bound up. So I learned that down the line, not too far down the line. That was when Tokita came, and it really helped. But okay, so another day, Mr. Mitsuya came back. During the afternoon, a tree was working on had a growth that he didn't like. Now here's something that you might be able to help me with. He cut it off and said 10 gusupio, and I counted 11 growths. So we went back to the dictionary. 10 gusupio, pronounced 10 gu soup P-O, is the way it was pronounced to me, is a disease from the pines in the mountain. It is blown over and drops the pollen on the trees where they become infested. So I looked at it as thought he was counting the different bad problems in there, but he was giving me the name of this disease. And what I found out later on, the pines in the mountains get this disease, and it goes through that it can wipe out huge areas. And it's a disease that goes in kind of through the needles, but it gets into the candle, and the candles do not grow. They don't produce any candles anymore. So if a pine doesn't produce any candles, it starts dying back. So when you see this, if you saw it in a bonsai, hopefully you only saw one spot because the mountains are not that far away and it would blow over, and you would cut back behind there and get back to a new clean spot. But there were trees that I saw later on that were just decimated by this disease. So it's a funny sounding disease with an awful result. So we don't have to worry about it here. Hopefully the ag department, if the tree comes over here, if it had it, they would notice it, because it's very recognizable once you know what you're looking for. But it was just a funny little name. So 10 is like an exhibition. It's a grand something. And this was not a good grand something. So it is tan in color and looks like a new candle before the needles have started to push. It has a fuzzy, scaly appearance, and the tips come to a point, gently rounded. The stalk is only as large as any of the individual growths. It can appear in singular form as well. The tan color turns dark brown with age. So this was all part of that problem. So it was obrero, put it to memory. You had to know this. If nothing else came, you needed to know what disease you were working with and what you needed to do about it. And if it was really came in, if it was that bad and came into the yard really bad, he would have noticed it because he was the one bringing it in, you know, from a client. So it would not have happened, but it could have blown in and just happened as a new candle starting to shoot. So yesterday, now this is going to the last night's dinner, I had a great experience. My hands are very sore, as I've mentioned before. When you look at the back of my fingers, all the little hairs are gone, and I'm sure at least one layer of skin is gone. Well, I was to fix the eggplant, slice it and put it in a strainer. And then Mrs. Mitsuya dumped some white powder stuff on top. She wanted it worked into the eggplant. And then the eggplant squeezed hard to get the liquid out. When I dipped both hands into the mixture, it wasn't sugar, it was salt. And I about hit the ceiling. After about 3 to 4 minutes of working the mixture, my hands felt like I'd put them in the fire. My hands aren't as sore today. I'm able to work on the black pines without as much discomfort as in the past. I don't know if the salt mixture had anything to do with it, but I might try it again. And I did, and it worked. So rub your hands with salt if you've got some pretty bad looking and needled up, pinpointed.
Rub in salt.
Rub in salt. Okay, it's rained. We can read rain 20 times over in here, and it would be 3 days later. So I'm starting to develop some bad habits. The dishes are washed and dried before the last bit leaves your chopstick, almost. So in other words, we don't spend a whole lot of time eating. As I mentioned before, the wash is done before the breakfast is served, which we finish around 7:15. It's easy to clean the house because of the practice of taking shoes off before you enter the house. I like a lot of what they do. So I actually kind of tried to bring that home. Didn't work too well with my husband, but you know, we got a little better at it. When you're working in the workshop, and you're starting to work on trees, we're working it with black pine season, so that's what you're going to hear a little bit about here. A good sized black pine can put down a pile of needles 6 inches deep and 2 feet in diameter. And I'm not talking about candle trimming. This is just from pulling individual needles, and we should be able to go through 3 pines that size in a day. These were big pines. And then these are daily notes to me, so I would remember what happened in the past when I would read them. So that's why I'm going over it now. But I'm trying to pick out what was more interesting about different parts of our trip, so you could enjoy it to some extent. We arrived, this is another day, we arrived back home in time for lunch after unloading the car. The afternoon was the same, black pines. That bite on my leg is the same, so that had happened just earlier. And it was making me react funny. Understand, it was not a mosquito, but a gnat that took a chunk of skin out. Never heard of that. I am not sure of the relationship, but she's either Mr. Mitsuya's mother or his father's wife or girlfriend. But in any case, we have another worker. So I'm just going on. Mr. Mitsuya has her cutting the candles off the pines while we pull. Really moves things along, but you look forward to the easier candle cutting. It would be a break from pulling all those needles. And then I started to understand who was what in the family, because I didn't know. It was just Obasan, you know, the old lady. And that was how they were referred to, Obasan, Oji-san. There was no names, and they didn't tell me who belonged to what. So I made up my own idea as to what was going on. So the woman that had come over is Mrs. Mitsuya's mother. And they live in the house on the property, but she's down on the lower side. And she came to the house to bathe in the evening because the house they were in, they didn't have a real bath, you know. So she would come over and relax when nobody else was around. And her husband is around most of the time. He'll come over and aggravate the dogs and tap his cane at the dogs. By the way, I have his canes now. When he passed away, there was one that I just loved that meant so much to me because it was him. And it reminded me of him and going after the dog. But I have that, and it's now with me in Alabama. So I use it often now when I'm going around the property, not to hit the animals. So they live in the house on the property, but come to the main house to bathe in the evening. He's around much of the time, working around the property, and eats with us some of the time. But it's Mr. Mitsuya's father that's the real interest. He is a man of many talents and has a great many friends who call constantly 85 years old. So at that point, I found out that he was Mr. Mitsuya's father that was living in the room next to me, not Mrs. Mitsuya's father. And this man was, oh gosh, he was a wonderful person. I can't say enough about him. He was quiet, he was calm, he was always doing something, and he had the birds, as I mentioned, in the hallway, and he would go out and he would put a little sticky stuff on his finger. And he would hold at certain times of the year, he would hold his finger up. I saw him out there for hours on end with this arm very still up in the air. He was looking for a certain type of bird that would like to light on his finger. You know, it wouldn't try to light on his finger. It was just something handy. And whatever he put on there, as well as being sticky and made it stick to the finger, it also had a little bit of food on it. These were the birds he was then bringing in and starting to keep in cages. And he made a little bit in here where he actually made the cages for the birds. And he had this plate, this metal plate that had different size holes in it. So he'd put a bamboo piece through and pull it through the big hole. And then it'd go through the next size. And all these holes had a way of shaving this smaller and smaller. So they would be really thin little spindles, and he would hand make all these bird cages. And I've got a few at home. Maybe I had one here. It's in Alabama. So it was, and then he had a way to he'd slide the bottom panel off, which still had those little rungs on top of that bottom panel, and he would put the panel, the cage, down into a tray of water. Well, the water would raise above all those little sticks that were at the base, and the bird would be able to clean itself, and then he would bring it back in and either put it into another cage or keep it in there. And some of the songbirds he had, again, right outside and maybe that's why I got up so early in the morning. One, because I needed to, but second, because the birds started to sing. I mean, they were lovely out there. I just enjoyed it. And I ended up down the line doing some sculptures of the dogs, and that's another story down in here. But I did a picture of Mr. Mitsuya sitting cross-legged with his arms like this, sitting right in front of the windows, looking up, watching the birds go from place to place, just contemplating what they were doing and how they were doing it. He was a marvelous man. I guess he made furniture as a living, and very high-end furniture, but he progressed to very high-end bird furniture. The delightful, delightful man. I just really enjoyed living in that part of the house with him. Okay, heavy rain, heavy rain, heavy rain. Good day. Boy, went through 43 trees between the three of us. Mrs. Mitsuya's older student. Now, I don't know who people are, so I'm always guessing at who they are. This is somebody that was working with her, so therefore it was her student. Later on, I found out who it really was. So an older student was, oh, you'll get there, you have to wait. A good day, went through, okay, very slow in myself. Last night I looked at my hands. I decided it was time to get a hand lotion. I put some on after tonight's shower. I thought I might do something while there's still some skin left. That's not a complaint, just a statement. Everybody's in the same boat. My shoulders hurt, my hands are raw, the mosquitoes are on rampage. Everybody else is feeling the same. If I work hard on trees, in the kitchen, etc., Mrs. Mitsuya, or Sayako, as I started calling her then, does a lot more. She has energy she hasn't even begun to tap. Mr. Mitsuya and his last student went off to a client's for a day. So we just again, little bits and pieces of what was really happening. Now I come to some fun things. There's a, I'm going to back up a few steps because something I'll be playing into it in a little while will help you with this. When I first came to town, one of the early trips in, the next morning or 3 mornings later or 4 mornings later, I don't remember. It was sometime where we were in the van and we were going down the quote unquote main street, which was this, I would not want to take a car down there. It was a very narrow street, and the telephone poles are not on the sidewalks or next to the sidewalk or next to the curb, because there wasn't a curb. There was a telephone pole in the street here and a telephone pole in the street here. So in order to get between them, you had to literally go like this, and it's two-way traffic. So it's not a very comfortable drive going through there. But there was this huge complex with this big tent over it. I had no idea what was underneath. So I was thinking, oh, they must be putting up a new grocery store, because that's kind of what they do in some of our areas. You know, just covering what they're doing from the street and whatever. And it was a couple years before that was uncovered. And later on, I found out that it was called the Home Gym, which was one of the two largest, like a hotel. So back in the days when the daimyo had changed and gone to Tokyo, what's that other town up on the other area? Not Tokyo, Kyoto area. So the families had a lot of their kinspeople taken to the Tokyo to hold hostage in a way. They were treated very well. They had lovely homes that they could stay in places, but they were there and they had to stay there. So if the families wanted to see them, they had to take this long trail, which was along where Mr. Mitsuya lived, the old Tokaido Trail. So what it turned out to be is there were two very large, call them hotels, living spaces, and the others were small spaces. And when these families would go through, they would stop there overnight and be refreshed or maybe stay a little longer. And this big tent over the top happened to be tenting this place because they were redoing it. And when it opened up and I saw it was actually under that tent, not the grocery store I thought it was a marvelous place. And we have pictures to show later on of what this place was like. and what it did. So it was a lovely extension, learning about how people lived years ago, where they went, how they went about going around. Okay. Here we're looking at this building seen very many winters, a fine patina on the wood, running inside the basin, near the entrance to clean your hands, a very cold water. This is not that place. This is in town where Mr. Mitsuya went. It actually turned out to be one of his clients. I thought we were going to a specialized, you know, I thought it was a restaurant. I thought it was this. I thought it was a lot of different things. It was a yard you'd have died for. I loved seeing it. So the building has seen many winters, a fine patina on the wood, inside a running basin near the entrance to clean your hands, a very cold water which did wonders for our heated bodies. At the entrance on the other side of a large, was a large coal-making sand pit from which the coals were drawn to cook our food in the hibachi at the center of our table. A hook hung from the rafters. If a pot was required, but ours, from the rafters, if a pot was required, excuse me, but ours was more exciting. The skewered fish were brought to the table, still flipping and squirming, probably a good 5 minutes before we set them over the heat. And on it went chicken, beef, a quail-type bird, vegetables, fungus, and a good Japanese beer to cleanse the mouth between bites. Looking up into the rafters, one could see the large bamboo joists and the cross ties lashed together with the finer bamboo laying on top, holding the 2-foot thick layer of reed roof. It was a delightful lunch. Happily, I was able to stretch my legs to the side from time to time, and we were at the end of the room, so the wall was used as a backrest. After the meal, we went inside. After the meal, we went inside and inside, meaning not inside the building now, we went inside their yard through the back area and enjoyed the grounds before parting the ways. This place, we went back to several times, usually to do work, few ground trees, but they had a few bonsai on the side, and sometimes we'd collect them, take them out. They had a wonderful entrance gate. It was in the downtown area. You would never know it because this place was built. So if the road was out here, this had a huge retaining wall that went way up. So from the inside, you were looking at this mountainous green with big trees and everything else on it inside. You knew nothing about what was beyond it, except there was a building across the way that might have been a 4-story apartment complex or something. It was downtown, but it was all on its own. And I still get goosebumps thinking of the place. We go there multiple times to pick up something, to drop it off, to change something. And it was just the one time we got to eat at their home. And it was the home. It was marvelous. So what I look forward to in Japan, just learning bonsai, it was amazing because every place we went was another learning trip. Something visual that was interesting, something so different from this country. And to just go over on a tour, you see a little bit, but I know all of us that have gone over there and actually lived it, just want to go back, want to stay. I love the way they lived. I love their feeling about things, how they felt about the land, the world, the what you do. When you do something, you do it right. You don't just do it to get it done. It's either done right or it's not done at all. Okay, now we're into towards the end of July, my second month. It was very windy, very heavy rain during the night. The temperature was 79 to 87 degrees. Very humid, 62 to 69. It was actually probably more humid than that, but my thing wasn't registering right. There's a typhoon heading towards Kyushu Island, and we're feeling the advance, the rain along with the wind. The wind is a relief from the rather calm week we've had. Hope it continues. This is my first month here. It certainly has gone quickly. I promised to talk about the streets in Japan outside the city proper. They are very narrow. And to add to that problem, all utility poles are in the street, not on private property. The two-way streets aren't bad as you can see in the example. Well, see, I was sending pictures at the time along with this. I was sending this as a letter to my husband so he could understand and enjoy what I was doing. I didn't know he was going to later on. He started sending them to Nina Regal down in Southern California, who was doing the golden statements. And she started putting this information, some of it, into golden statements. Luckily, she cherry picked through it. So they're not so bad as you can, but it's hard for two cars to pass without moving between poles. This makes every drive an exciting one. Now, when you pull off these older main roads onto the side streets, the driving is only, you have to be crazy or brain dead to go there, you know, basically, or suicidal. It's amazing. Houses are built wherever there's a piece of land and the road goes wherever there's room. This is a typical corner bend in the road that could be considered an impossible feat for any car, but the Japanese are able to get trucks around it. And I don't know how delivery people or postmen ever find some of these houses. The streets are unmarked. As far as I can tell, many look like unused alleys. Now, just a little, there's a board. Towards the end of my apprenticeship, it might have been a little beyond that when I'd come back and help out at certain busy times. There was this huge plaque at one of the areas, and it had all these different streets all over the place. And it's like Mitsuya's home, you know, it was 61 Owakicho. Well, and you could have 75 Owakicho over here, 20 roads away. And then it would be, you know, another name for a different street here, but there may be another Owakicho. You know, they just, how mailmen found anything over there just amazed me, because nothing pertained to anything else except just a word, or just remember where something was, and then you go back to it, and that's where you drop the letter. So a little thing Hideko had called that was interesting to me, and working on, wanted to know if there was anything that I did not understand. Of course, it was a lot, and what she could help me with. And then I went on, must have been caught 15 times by mosquitoes today. Several of the trees seem to have homes for the critters. And I just really, this was something I didn't expect, that we would be doing the same tree for what seemed like forever. You know, it was black pine season. We did black pines. That was it, you know. And then when black pines were over, we started into something else. Here, this is another day. Back by 10 o'clock, that means he was gone, and we got back for tea at 10 o'clock, then worked on the remaining 10 trees. Did I say remaining 10? Well, as it turns out, we'll be doing grandfather's 24 as well. These are still black pines. His father had all his pines that he was working on in one area, which was in front of the wing where I lived. So I saw them all the time, but they were newer ones. They were being built up and worked on for probably later sales, but they stayed away. They were not the trees. They were in growing conditions. Mrs. Mitsuya had a few of her clients' trees to finish along with Chochikobai. I assume if she's working on trees that aren't as good as the ones we're working on, they were her clients. They weren't. You know, they were still trees that he had, lesser trees that, you know, she would take care of. And then both boys ran the trees into the workshop. Well, ran is not a good word. They grunted, they complained, and they shuffled their way back and forth. And as with all these last trees, very heavy. And towards the middle of the afternoon, they spent much of their time shoveling the cuttings out with a pitchfork and shovel while we were working so fast. And we weren't finished. 5:30 we finished. This chapter on black pines is finished. The end of that part. August starts a new and wonderful beginning. Tosho needle juniper. Good thing our hands are toughened up by the black pines, because the needle juniper, especially the ones over there, are wicked. I mean, they will take you and bloody you in a short time. Okay, I'd like to talk about Oji-san, the grandfather. He says, the one at the house, the room next to mine. We talked about his birds are wonderful in little cages, bamboo. I've been wondering where I could purchase them. One for myself and one to give him as a gift. Well, I found out he makes them. So as I mentioned earlier, I didn't know that at the time. And he sits in the doorway of his room, uses bamboo that's been dried, and it was nice to see the progression of all that. So there are things that I feel I could do, you know. I feel like I could do everything. I just don't have the time. He sits in the doorway of his room, and his tools are all handmade. He made all the tools, and it was a lovely time just to watch him work the few times I had a little extra time, you know. And okay, so I'm back working on the Tosho. Around noon, we were ready to start on a new project. The fence man arrived just as we started working on leveling off the new yard. So this is a brand new house that the Mitsuyas had moved into, and there's lots of stuff to be done. Okay, let me just, yeah, okay, go ahead, let's go with the audience.
This audience member, this is Peter Boyer again.
Oh, Peter Boyer. How many are you allowed? Okay, go for it.
Over the limit. I picture you watching Oji-san Mitsuya, grandfather Mitsuya, making these bamboo bird cages. And then I recall you should have been watching Mr. Mitsuya look under the mirror. And I wondered.
Oh no, this was lunchtime. This is my 10-minute break after lunch.
And I wondered if for you to learn, I see that you watch, but you also have your hands on the craft work on the bonsai. And what's the relationship between watching or explanation and actual manual trial and error learning?
He would do the first couple, if you were working on black pines and I was brand new to it, he'd show me how to cut the candles, what he wanted, how many needles to pull off, different type, same type of pine, but different maturity, different age that would be handled differently. So he started me off with something simple that was younger, that I was, you know, able to do easily. He just showed me, this is what you do. You pull this, you cut here, you cut the candle, you don't cut the candle, whatever the case may be. He just very quickly show you on the tree, and then you went from there. And if something, and he's sitting there. If he's gone, he's giving you a tree more than likely that he's not worried too much about. And Mrs. Mitsuya is there too. So, I mean, you didn't, yeah, I made mistakes, everybody does, but you didn't want to make them more than once. The same mistake, because, you know, then it, you know, it would be, I'd feel bad about it. But he would always, in the beginning, start to show you what you needed to do. And he didn't hoover around you. He showed you a couple things, and then you put it to memory, and that's what you do, top to bottom. And if there was something wrong, he'd say, damn it, hopeless. And then he'd maybe go back and say, this is different, and why? You know, maybe it was a different level, maybe it was, you know, a stronger tree, a weaker tree, or whatever. So there were little thoughts about what you needed to do and why you needed to do it, but they weren't easily explainable except through the hands, because our language barrier at that time was horrendous. I mean, I needed more time to study it before I came over. I didn't have that time. It was like we were over at this, and he said, yes, you got it, and bang, and you can start, like I said, in 2 weeks, but it was a couple months because I had some surgeries that turned out I needed. But anyway, it's all about watching his hands. So I'm sitting here. When he was there working, he was sitting there, and she's always out in that area. So I had two people to watch them. And I just learned when I'm doing this, you kind of see out of the side, or you just glance over once in a while to see where he's at. I also watched him. He would get up off of his chair, which I didn't do. I stood or sat in my chair, depending on what I needed to do, and worked on the tree. And I noticed after a while, he was absent, and I turned around and he had gone outside through the doors. It's all glass sliding doors there. They'd be wide open. And he would go outside and he'd squat and he'd look at a tree from a distance, you know, how's that look? Does this need to be whatever? And it took me a while to figure out what he was doing. I thought he was just stretching, and at the time he was smoking, I thought maybe that was why he went out. But it was more, he wanted to see how that tree looked from a distance. Do you need to go down? Do you need to get up? Is this balance the right way? So I didn't do a lot of that. I didn't have quite the quality of the trees at the time. You know, he's just starting me off with some younger stuff. And a few of them were really nice trees, but that happened a few months later when I was a little more comfortable with them. But of course, that was a different tree again. That was not pine season. So all of what they did, both of them, if I didn't do it right, if it was really wrong, he'd stop me. I mean, no question about it, because he's not going to have a tree ruined. But I'd watched him enough over here at different workshops, at conventions. I mean, for the several years that I was roaming around, whenever he came over, I watched and I saw it. So I got a little feeling ahead of time of what he expected. And he, like I said, would, Val Monroe, somebody who's another person who was very into it and would do what I did. The two of us would go around to different places. And we would pick up all the stuff he would drop on the floor, because he would show somebody else something, or we'd pick up one that hadn't been cleaned up the right way or hadn't been cleaned up at all. And we would practice and ask him, is this okay? You know, and he'd shake a head yes or no. So we would try to repeat what he was doing at classes over here. So when somebody's giving you a class, you're at a convention, taking a seminar, or at a local club class, watch some other people too. See what's happening to their trees. What are they doing? What are they trying to show you? If it's a demonstrator, if it's, you know, whatever's going on. It helps to walk around, especially if you're newer. You know, walk around, watch what different people are doing. You know, does it look right? Does it not look right? Why are they doing this? Why are they not doing that? You know, what's going on? And it's not going to help just to have somebody push it right in your face all the time, or to do it, you know, 40 feet away up on a stage. You're not going to be able to see things. So it really helps to get down really close to see what's going on and what are people doing in this small space, not what's happening to the whole tree initially. What's happening to the whole tree is important, because that's what it is. But we're not going to dress up this one sleeve and leave the rest of it with dungarees, you know. So you've got to get whatever you can do here, you have to be able to do there. And it's maybe a little different up here. It's just strong on a pine, so that's going to be a strong area. It needs more stuff cleaned off of it. Down at the bottom, it's weaker, so you're going to need to leave a few more needles on it, and you may not be quite as severe in cutting back the candles or taking them back as hard, or leaving a few small ones here and there throughout. So those are all refinements that you get. You don't get it right away. You get it over a period of time, and that's the way he taught. What he could do was way beyond what I could do, way beyond what I could do, or even think I could do. So he would give me the easy things to do in the beginning. Now, we had a whole month of working on black pines. We worked long hours on them. We worked just black pines. You know, one was done, the next one was right there on the table. You know, start to move one off, and there's another one, and you just keep going. So after a while, you just kind of pick up a rhythm. You pick up a sense for what you need to do and why you need to do it. And this tree looks a little different and looks lopsided. You know, over on this side it's weak, and over here it's strong. So you need to do a little more work over here and not so severe over there. You try to get your balance going. And these are all little fine things that you start to pick up. You don't get it all at once. There's no way you could get it all at once. You may think you've got it. I thought I got it till the next year. You know, like I said, when we started on black pines the next year, it was another story. When we started on needle junipers the next year, it was a huge story. I mean, you know, every moment you had to be a couple steps ahead. You couldn't stay where you were. There was no stay. The only stay would be stay back in the States. There wasn't any consideration at all about moving on if you didn't move on. But you had a time period in between. That first year was that first year. The second year was the second year. As I found out what that's more than a slap. The third year, you just knew you had to be moving ahead, you know, and as you got in through the second year, going towards the third year, you really started to pick up on many, many more little nuances that you didn't even know were there, or potentials. And that's what bonsai is about. And that's why bonsai is so wonderful. You're not just copying what you saw somebody else do. You are out there thinking ahead, saying, well, you know, I'm looking at this, the balance doesn't seem right, it looks a little weak here, the color's a little off. They're little tiny things that most people wouldn't even notice. But after you're in it that long, you start to pick up these things. And that's what, he's not going to stand over your shoulder and give you and feed you all this information. He's going to give you little bits. And he's going to see what you do with those little bits. And can you kind of figure out what the next little bit is? Sometimes the next little bit is that hand slap because you didn't quite figure it out the right way. But it's truly, anything in life is like that. When you see something, you just know that maybe it can grow a little bit more this way, or it can go that way. It doesn't matter what it is, whether you're sewing or doing something with trees or working with mud, or, you know, whatever it is that you enjoy doing, you progress. You get a little better every time you do it. It's not how fast can I get this done. That's not somebody who's really interested in the fineness of work. That's not going to be a good bonsai person. That might be a good person working out in the garden and just doing veggies and things like that. It's fine. But when you get into bonsai and the quality of the bonsai that he was doing, it's all about refinement. It's the little picky stuff that most people would never see that really makes it a great bonsai. And that's what it's about. And my life has been about that, except for my body. I look at everything. What can I do to make it better? But not just to please me, but maybe to please somebody else. One of my big bugaboos is out here behind me. In our little semi-storage area here. The water system is not in a great position to really water the trees properly, so I'm very frustrated with that. But I'm more frustrated in that the people that come here all the time, they're very good about certain things, but there are things that they don't see. They don't know they have to see, I guess. And it's so important to get the trees moved directly underneath those water heads, because if they don't, if they're off here, the water's hitting here, it's not hitting the tree, we're going to lose trees. And it frustrates me that I don't see that they don't see. They don't look up to see where that head is. Okay, I got to move it this way a little bit. I've got to push it over some. Okay, that one's all right. Oh, this one, boy, that's right in between the two of them. You know, it's things like that that are so important. That's what bonsai is about, and what good work is about, is really paying attention to what's important. And if you don't water a tree, if this little tree sat in here for a week, it's going to be a beautiful color. And you can spray paint it if you want after that, and make it whatever color you want, I guess, and enjoy it later. You don't have to water it anymore. You know, it's seeing everything, and I'm applying this to bonsai, but you can apply it to anything in your life. If you're going to do something, do it right. If you're going to do it at all. If you're not going to do it right, why bother? You know, it's something you put on yourself, and it makes your life so much better. I mean, when I go out and work, I don't always just work in bonsai. I do work. I have a yard out in New York, which I have not been able to get to this year, so I'm usually there 3 times a year. I do her yard. She has a marvelous yard and a big trees. And I mean, it is my pleasure to work in that yard because she takes such good care of it. She doesn't do the work, but she has workers that can clean up and stuff. But I just so love being outdoors, and that's what bonsai is about. You're outdoors most of the time. If you're not outdoors, those windows are blown wide open, front and back in the, in their workshop area. You're always breathing fresh air, wonderful air. You're not stuck in an office. I don't know how people do it. So I know many people kind of feel that way, but maybe not as strongly as I do, just because of what I saw over there. I mean, I picked up on what they did. I learned a lot of this from them. I enjoyed things that way, but I was blown away with their commitment, their values, their feelings about things, and their hurts. They just kind of shoved the hurts away. And that wasn't important. What was important was maybe you're hurting a little bit, but this is feeling better. We have somebody here.
We have a few questions. So
Okay.
we have the first question, Kathy. What is your favorite bonsai and what is your favorite food?
Food. My favorite food. Well, actually, natto is almost right at the top. I don't know. Just food in general. I'm a foodie. I can't help it. I'm my dad's daughter. I love food. I love food. I love different tastes. I like them fresh. I like raw food a lot. I do. And what was the other question? Sorry.
The other was, what is your favorite bonsai?
My favorite bonsai. Well, I'll tell you, the one that's in front of me at the time, not this one, whatever I'm working on. I don't have a favorite. Do you have a favorite child? Maybe some people feel that way about their kids. Oh, I like this one better than that one. You like them all because they all have something different to give. You love all the trees. Whatever's in front of me at the time, I'm happy. I'm tickled with. I'm sorry I can't. I'd have to say black pines just to make my teacher happy because he was kind of known as the black pine guy there, but he did everything else as well. And I don't, it's usually what I'm working on.
Beautiful. So then there is this question, by the way, was from Hiromi. And then here's one from Wendy Miko. What percentage of the bonsai were from clients? Do most Japanese own and admire trees that pros? Others have prunes over the years.
Okay, there's a lot of different ways, just like over here. There are clients that we would go to in some out of the way places and some in the middle of town that would take care of their own trees to some certain extent, but for the good ones and for the ones that have very special needs or are really good trees, then the boss would come in and we would either work at a client's yard or bring the trees back to the house. There were many times where the trees were hauled back just because we would get a bunch of them. The clients would, in most cases, keep them up as far as keeping them weed free and cleaning up some of, if there were pines, maybe some of the red or discolored needles, other trees, if there was a little damage done to them somewhere from the winds or all the wonderful storms they had over there. The client may or may not do something. There are like clients over here. There's some that never touch the trees. They just like them looking nice, and others that do a lot of work to the trees, and you come in and you just kind of clean them up and make them look better. So it changes. It really has to do with what you enjoy doing, what you like. If you just like looking at wonderful trees, or if you like touching them and working on them, at least keep them weeded. That's the biggie. on my point. I like to see a tree cleaned up. I mean, if the tree looks beautiful on the top and you've got weeds all over the place on the bottom, I mean, come on now, let's get something else going. Is that another?
Another question from Peter.
Yeah.
Okay, Peter has another question.
Could you comment on these clients you visited? How many of them lived in concrete environments like crowded cities, and how much was these naturalistic bonsais? What role do they play in sweetening their lives?
Okay, the clients lived in a lot of different situations. Let me give you the best and the worst. The best was, and it's not the only best, there were a lot of them. The one client lived up on a hill, or partway up a hill, was actually a Buddhist monk, had his monastery or whatever was up there. At least I thought it was a monastery. I mean, you know, where they had, I've slept in the rooms up above where they have these wonderful tokonomas, and then they would always have something, filled flowers or a little bonsai or something in there. But all the bonsai were out in the backyard. So when we would go, we would just start working on them, and we'd be there sometimes 3 or 4 days, sometimes bring some of the trees back. They did some of the work. They would generally keep them kind of cleaned up so we didn't have a weed problem. We didn't have, you know, a trashy look. It was a place where other people would go and see. Also learned how to make mochi there, you know, stomping the stuff down from scratch. Did some of that one day at that place. But each place was different. You may have had a very secure backyard location where, you know, people wouldn't know you had bonsai or wouldn't be able to get back there. And others were almost had their bonsai out on the street. You know, there was no real fence. They had a couple of shrubby bushes, and then the bonsai were right up next to it, and anybody could walk in and, you know, take it out, I guess, if they were willing to, but they didn't. So the better quality bonsai, house-wise, it was all a mixed bag. I mean, you would be in big mansions, you'd be in little wonderful Japanese style situations. You'd have a terrace off of a condominium type feeling. You'd see a lot of the rooftop stuff. We did a lot of the rooftop stuff. There's nothing like going up a roof that's a diagonal slope, and then you have these little wooden boards coming out with the bonsai up on them, and we'd have to go up a ladder to get to them, to back up down off of that and then hand them down to the next person. It was lovely. There were a few places I would rather not have gone again, but we went many times. Kind of got used to it after a while. The ladders were not very good either. They were usually very rickety, and it was, you know, or one pole down the middle with the thing. Oh, that was awful. So it's a mixed bag, and I mean, there was one, yeah, this one I could probably talk about. There was this one place we went to many times that had a few really good bonsai. It was, he had a like a Circle K or 7-Eleven type unit. It might have been a Circle K, but in his backyard, you went in, and I'm scratching already thinking about the place. I haven't put myself there in a long time. It was weedy. I mean, tall weeds and grass and crap all over the place. I mean, you'd never want to walk in there. Mosquitoes that were so thick you couldn't put your fist through them. I mean, you know, and make a hole. They'd all close back in again. I mean, it was a place that he and I both, you know, you just felt creepy when you left. You felt creepy when you went in. So you got into this part of the backyard, and we stumped down the weeds a little bit, and then there were some trees that were hidden back there. He kept it that way because it was safer. He felt nobody else would want to go back there. He was right. And then later on, they built another place, and it meant we went up the stairs, and then now all the bonsai were up in that upper area on the deck for the new house. But we went into a lot of different situations. That was one I didn't ever want to go back to, but when the new place was built, it was better. And he had some good trees. But, you know, we're all afraid people are going to see what we have and they want to steal them. So he was the same way. He just took it to the nth degree. And then there were other places, if you went through the trains, anybody that's gone through Japan sees a lot of bonsai on the roofs, on the decks in different places. One of his clients had most of his really good trees were up on an upper deck that was over the garage. It was just built over the top. And you had a walkway that you could go up, a little staircase on the side, go up to it. But for the really big trees to get them up and down, he had this huge winch that was up there that you would put on this big board and it would just pick it up and put it over the top and then slowly, you know, bring it down. So there were two places we had like that, that were easier to get the plants so we could load them in and take them out. But most of the people had a mixed bag. You know, there were some junky ones they just kind of played with. Sometimes it was the wife liked it because of the flower, and the husband didn't, you know, go ahead and play with your flower thing. And other cases, it was more the woman that actually liked to play with it, and the husband would have a little bit to do with it. But, so it was kind of interesting. Every place you went was different. Some of the things I talked about in here in the future, the drives to some of these places were more interesting than the places we went to. It was like, are we going to fall off the side of the road? There's this huge storm. I mean, there's water pouring down the highway or down the roadway, and it's narrow, not wide enough for two cars, but yet there's two cars that go past one another. I don't know how they did it. Trucks that can get around, like I said, corners that shouldn't be navigable. Every little bit I did over there, I enjoyed. I liked seeing the differences. I liked the different personalities in places we went. They did some great things for me. When I went over certain places, once a year, this one, the one again that had the Buddhist temple, they wanted to take me someplace special. They said, lunchtime, we're going someplace special. So they took me to this water area where I don't know if they were just wild or not, but they were pink, what are those birds? Flamingos. Just loads of pink flamingos. They walk right up to you. I mean, and I've got some wonderful pictures of them, and I was actually walking around like one of them with its leg up or something. But I mean, they did different things. Another time they took us to, which was very difficult for me. We went to an onsen. I went to an onsen a lot of different times, but usually it was just the guys. The women would never show up. You know, it was just a guy thing getting away, and then me. And it's like, okay, so there's one place I was ready to go in, and I thought, okay, I'd been to a lot of them, and I didn't use any of them because I was, you know, there's this big gal coming down the road. I'll go into that pond, and it's going to be overflowing. So finally, I got my courage up at this one place. This is going off for funny things. And as I'm walking out my room, because it was a place we were staying a couple days, the guys were having some kind of a club meeting or whatever. We had this big tatami room we were in, but we were going to do the onsen that night. And I finally got up enough courage to do it. And as I'm walking out my room door with the woman who was showing me where it was, I saw this picture on the side of the wall, and I looked at it, and I said, "Is this where I'm going?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "But there are men there." And she said, "Yeah." I said, "So you have a big staircase coming down here with no railings, big staircase coming down here with no railings. But in between," she said, "it's okay. There's this metal, concrete buffer, I guess, that comes up from the ground inside the pool that comes here about that high above the water, and that's the men on this side." And she said, "They're on their own side." I said, "Yeah, but I'm walking down those steps with nothing on." I'm not exactly you know, a tiny little Japanese lady that they would ignore. And I proved my point. One person that came over, and just before I left Japan, someone from down south was studying with Mr. Mitsuya, came over for a short time. Cheryl Manning. Well, Cheryl is bigger than I am, where it really pays attention to. So we were in this area that finally there was an onsen where it had this big wall coming down. The guys were on one side, we were on the other. We had our own little pond. I said, okay, all right, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. She said, okay, we're doing this together. So again, there was one other lady upstairs in the room where we undressed and all, and then we came down our steps. And as we got into the water, we heard all this giggling and blah, 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 and all this other stuff. And as we look around, here's this big wall coming down to the water. But there's a gap about that big just above the water line. And all we see are these beady little eyes. So we got up and we went outside to the outside one, which was nice, the Rotenburg. But at the same time, when we got out of that one to go into the other, as we looked, we just happened to glance upstairs, and I swear the call went out because every woman that was anywhere near came. That room was packed, and there were all these beady eyes all over this window wall. So I got used to it after a while, but you know, that was not one of my favorite things over there. But it was nice to sit in the one outside. It was cold outside and the water was so nice and warm, and you saw a little bit of snow on the mountain and stuff. It was lovely.
Do you have any pictures?
Not that I would say. Okay, so one of the things any other comments on here yet? We have anyone
Well,
else
there's maybe
asking?
some that, yeah, there's one more question and one more comment. So what did you like most about your apprenticeship, and what did you dislike most about your apprenticeship? And this is from Nina Ragele. And also
Nina Ragel?
Yes, Nina Ragele.
She's the one that got a lot of this information, so she knows.
Oh.
No, okay.
But yeah, maybe she wants to ask it for everybody else. So, and that, what is the one thing that you take from your experience that keeps you with you all the time?
Oh, you just do the best you can do absolutely all the time. You never do something halfway. You know, if you're going to do it, you do it right. My dad brought me up with that. You do it right. You know, if you're going to do it, get through it, learn everything you can about it. Just do it. This halfway bit, oh, I'm just going to, then that's enough. Yeah, well, it's okay. You know, oh, it's okay. It's not okay. And that's one of the things I have here. You know, it's hard for me to get people to understand that you don't do something quick just to get it done. That's not the way it's done. You do it right. If it takes you a little more time to do it that way. It's what bonsai is about. It's about caring more about what happens here than what happens here. Because this is what you're looking at. This is the beauty. We're trying to create some wonderful little treasure that, you know, would normally be big in the outdoors. And we can do that, you know, trimming trees outdoors. That's why I like doing the big stuff, because then I can see how to make it look, not the big stuff look small, but the small stuff look big. What is it when we start grooming our small trees? We're not really paying attention to what things really look like. And I have a little problem with some of the Japanese trees, because I saw a lot of them over there, and even in the professionals, a lot of professional trees that go to Kokufu and other big shows. I just get bored with them after a while because they're almost cookie cutter. You look at them and they all look the same. They're groomed the same. They don't, some of them don't have a whole lot on the inside. They're just all outside. Some have some good stuff inside, but there's something missing. There's almost like a soul missing. You don't make it so perfect that it looks good because it doesn't look good. My teacher would always leave one little thing that was just off a little bit. You wouldn't really see it, but it would make everything else look so much greater. It's not everything looks bad. It's just some little twerk. You don't even know that it doesn't look right, but it pulls everything together. So little things like that make a difference. And Nina did a lot. She was the one that took a lot of the information that my husband was sending her and putting it into Golden State. And so that helped other people understand what was going on or why I was doing things or what was happening. Like I said, I didn't know about it for quite some time, but I don't know. I know I went off a little bit from what she was asking, but.
No, that's perfect. Absolutely perfect.
So, oh, do you remember the large spider I told you about? Well, I did. I had missed a lot of things here, so I wanted to talk about that. A lot of big bugs in Japan. I mean, just unbelievable bugs. Cockroaches were huge. Everything you could think of were huge. So this large spider, well, it has a twin sister that showed up tonight. And just to show you the size, I took a picture. Unfortunately, this thing doesn't have any of the pictures in it, but it was big. So Sensei went to kill it and missed very fast. Now we have a large spider loose in the house. Makes for a very restful evenings, of course, because you're sleeping on the floor. Oh, this was one of the times we had a lot of different ways of eating. Some of it was on the run at these truck stops along the highway. You know, you'd go in and they'd have these bowls of noodles. Oh, bowls of noodles. Yeah, right. These truckers they'd get their bowl of noodles and they go, you know, and in 30 seconds it was gone. I was still dipping my finger in the tip of it because I couldn't get past that. It was so hot. It was bubbling. When they hand you the bowl, it was still bubbling. I don't know what the inside of their gut looked like, but it had to have been gone. So I would, when my teacher was looking, I'd try to dump some of the liquid out, you know, just to cool it down. I could eat the noodles. Like, oh, it was so hot. So well, I ate a lot of different foods, and it was interesting to watch how people, what they went after, what they liked, what they didn't like, and I had to try it. I don't know, but it, I wouldn't want to eat that spider.
Question comes to mind.
Okay.
Could you compare learning from, say, reading a book that might say, you know, cut all candles and so forth, back to this spot? In other words, learning from a cookbook and the end result versus learning by interacting with a live object such as a growing plant, and maybe it's idiosyncratic destiny, like I have a long-term plan for this, or it wants to be that, versus, I mean, could you compare your learning process to that of a person who's never tasted French cooking but bought a French cookbook?
Okay, next. Hands-on is the best way, and you know, get your hands dirty, get your feet dirty, get the dirt under your fingernails, do whatever it takes. You can read a book, and you can think you understand everything. It depends on who wrote it. I've seen a lot of books on the same subject that are 180 degrees from the other one, if they can all be 180 degrees away. I mean, they're just, and where you live has a little something to do with how you trim and when you trim and why you trim. You know, you have different climate. Maybe you've got a lot of rain. Maybe you don't have a lot of rain. Maybe you get a lot of sun. You don't have a lot of sun. You're foggier. You know, there's just, it's got a longer wintering. It doesn't have any wintering. all those things have something to do with how you trim and work on the tree, what you're giving to it or taking from it. And it's really hard to have a book that suits everybody. And I don't care who wrote it. They're all, I've seen people try to do something. If there was a book just on pines and went over all there are different types of pines, but the different time periods, the different things you're trying to accomplish and why you're trying to accomplish it, that might work out a little better. But to have a set, this is the way you do it, period, it doesn't always work out right. Because it really is location, location, location. When we went to different places, way up north, down south, wherever it was over there, there were slight differences in what you did and why you were doing it. And to the novice that may have been doing it, it may not have looked like it was different. But after a while, I thought I was doing exactly the same as my teacher was. He was next to me. I was kind of watching and doing it. But the product really was different. And I didn't know that until later on down the road. So pines are a little bit tougher because they truly are about the candle. If your candle stays on too long, and it's the wrong time of the year, you go into the wrong time and then you try to cut it back, you're not going to get the response that you might have gotten if you did it at the right time of the year. You may be cleaning needles out a little bit earlier, a little bit later. If you live here in California versus New York versus Alabama, Tennessee, you go up north, you're doing things at a different time. You've got a different length of time to work with, more or less. You've got more heat, you have less heat, you have more humidity, you have less humidity. All those things play into what you do to your tree. So you can't just, it's not one thing suits all. Just because it's a black pine doesn't mean it's a black pine, doesn't mean it's a black pine. They may be a longer needle, they may be a little shorter needle just because of the parentage. The pines that my teacher really liked to work with were from the locality he was used to. That's where the great black pines grow. Now his dad, to almost the day he died, he was on his bike at least once a week, going down at the right time of the year when the pine cones would start to drop, because he knew the mother trees. He knew where the good seeds were coming from. He showed us how to get the seeds out of the cones and when and why and what you do later and how you pick them after they start to grow. Which ones are the better ones? Which ones are the bad ones? And these are all things that if we're going to start to understand a little bit more about trees, it's not just a juniper, it's not just a pine. It's like kids growing in a family. You can have kids from the same parents and they all come out different. And that's good and that's bad. If you're looking at trees, you want to find the best you can. If you can't find the best, you go with the next one, but maybe you'll graft onto it later on when you find good foliage off of somebody else's tree. You go cutting their tree up when they're not home. Not really. But it's about learning what's good and how to make it better, learning timing, and all of this. It's hard to put into one book. If we had a seasonal book, or if we had a locational book, what do you do in this general area? You go from here, from the coast into Sacramento, your timing for working on the trees is a little different. It's a big difference because of the temperature changes that much. You go up to the mountains, you've got another one. You go back east, you're humid and hot and muggy, or you're this, and it depends on where you are, what you're doing, what time you're doing it. So making a book, I don't know that you're thinking about doing that, but making a book on a subject is nice, but you've got to cover all those areas. Because what I did in Japan and what I'm doing here is a little different. Because we're not hot and humid as it was there. We don't have the humidity, we don't have the moisture, we don't have a lot of things. So in some aspects of the art, we're hindered a little bit in that we don't have quite the temperature needs or the humidity needs that that tree would prefer, because that's where it grew up. The great pines that we use came from there. You know, if you're using a Monterey pine and doing it around Monterey, it's fine. If you bring that inland and try to do a Monterey pine towards Sacramento area, you're going to have trouble with it. It'll be okay, but it's not going to be great, not like it grows out there. When you see, you know, just different trees the same way. The junipers you go to, you know, we have junipers in the mountains that are wonderful, but they can be the Sierra junipers. You can have one juniper in the Sierra that has a bluer color, a very blue color. Another one has a little bit of a greenish blue, and another one more green. One has big, heavy, hefty needles, and one has real fine needles. You know, one has a beautiful wood on it, and the other one has beautiful foliage. Now you got to marry the two. So that means you're probably going to end up grafting. But to get what you want, you need to go to the source and hope that that source will survive well with your conditions. There's nothing, to me, you should never take a tree that you know is going to give you a lot of angst and horrible results, because it's a totally different area than it needs to be growing in. You're going to be fighting it, and therefore you're never really going to have something great out of it. So it's better to, if you live on one coast or another, humid, dry, whatever it is, if you find a material that works well in that zone, to be a good bonsaiist, that's what you need to be working with. You know, my teacher was that way. I mean, the pines, yes, he worked with more pines than he worked with others, and junipers, but he lived right there where they are. So he was able to do some tremendous things with it. So that's a hard one, because too many of us, oh, I'm the only one that has this kind of a tree. Ha ha ha, I got this, you don't. You know, I found this on the corner. Oh, I brought this back from whatever. Maybe you have, but if you've got a collection of that kind of tree that's a little different, just because it's different, you don't want something this area, I want something from Ohio, I want something from here, I want something from whatever, you're going to have a lot of trouble building a good tree. You'll get a nice looking tree, but you're not going to have the best. So it depends on what you're really looking for. When somebody's playing with this and having fun with it, yeah, try a lot of different things. But when you find out what works best in your neighborhood, in your yard, that's what you really need to work with if you want something grand and wonderful. And, you know, it's up to the individual. Everybody likes something different. Yeah. That's why my trees right now, unfortunately, are in Gordon's yard and not back in Alabama yet. But they'll like Alabama.
Kathy,
Help yourself.
do you think Mr. Mitsuya was trying to teach you all the answers to, or all the do this? Do you think he was trying to teach you a set of answers and a set of goals, or was he more interested in trying to teach you how to ask a question when you didn't know the answer?
How to find out what my question was first, and then what do I do about it? I mean, he wouldn't give you all the answers. He'd give you a lot in the beginning, but after a while, it was on your palate. You know, you do this and you watch out of the side of your eye. Why did he do that? You know, and after a while, I mean, he would give you some answers in the beginning because he needed to, you know, or just little comments. But it was on you after a while, absolutely. And it was either at the end of the session, done it, hopeless, you know. And that, as time went on, was a little less noticeable because it wasn't he didn't have to say it as often. I'd started picking up from his cues because he had a lot. It was like that hand bit, slapping your hand, you know. It was more than a slap, but I learned right away, okay, that was last year, this is this year, I guess okay, the next year I better know more. So each year you really got into understanding what you were supposed to see at different times of the year. Could be the different type of tree, you know, it didn't matter. When you had a new tree, if it was a deciduous tree, you know, conifer, broadleaf evergreen, whatever it might have been, you had a different subject in front of you. You had a different way of approaching it, and you had to figure it out. Sometimes he'd let you figure it out. Sometimes he had to let you know. I have to tell you, there was one tree there that, somewhere I have a picture of it. I don't know what happened to my pictures. I have to look around. But I had this, he had this tree he was working on that came in. It was a collected tree from the mountains, and it had this huge, long trunk that just, it came up and it went way up. I mean, it was up there. And he wanted it down here. And it had taper to it, but it was massive. So I was massive. So I got up on a chair, and I got up on a table, a work table, and it was right next to where he was. And I had to grab a hold of, this is what he wanted me to do, grab a hold of the top of that tree and hold on to it. And then I dropped 1 foot off of the table, and then he kind of moved the tree over a little bit more, and then I let my other foot go. And I was hanging in the air, and that thing started coming down. So I learned that there were a lot of things that maybe you couldn't do yourself, but you could do if you had somebody else along. And I was just the right subject with the right weight. And we just pulled that down and then cranked it down. And he had a cord on it, a real heavy cord. And we tied it to the trunk down below and then around the pot. And then we just gradually start bringing that down more and more. So it took us a couple days, but there were another couple hold-ons and pull-downs, not too many off the chair after that. But we took that whole branch down and just moved it down underneath and back through. It was really quite an interesting trick. But I found out then you can do anything you want to do if you know how to do it. You got the right person around to help you if you need it, and you do it slowly. You don't try to get it from there to there in one move. It took quite a few moves, but it was interesting. And it was fed through. That's right. There was a split trunk, so it was kind of fed through the split trunk. I'll have to find the picture of that one. It's an interesting tree. So anything that's possible, you just have to know how to do it. You can't do it too fast. You got to take your time. You've got to know what you're working on. You've got to, learn with one good subject and then work on others. Don't go buying 50 different trees right away and try to know how to do all of them if you haven't done it before. You got a few to start with, a couple pines maybe, or a couple junipers here, because junipers are so easy to get. It could be maples. It could be anything. But you try with the same type right away. Having one of everything isn't always the way to go, because it's very confusing for new people. Because everyone is treated differently. Every tree, every type of tree, just like working in the yard, each one has its own way of shaping, of growing, of presenting itself, and that's what you need to know. You can't, too many people make a pine look like a juniper, look like a maple, look like a quince. I mean, they just have them all trimmed up the same way, different colors, different things happen to them, and it's almost like they don't care. One has flowers, one doesn't. I mean, but it's cookie cutter, and it happens a lot. So it's if you're going to get started, you start from the beginning. It's always nice. Teach the students, let's not have a bunch of different trees. It's one of the problems with going to a convention, I think. New students go to a new workshop, they get a new tree, and then they get another workshop with another new tree, and it's different, and this one's different. And by the time they get home, they don't remember anything because they've worked on 3 totally different trees, and it's their first time out, and they don't know what they're doing, and they don't know how to take care of them at home. So if you're going to start teaching it in classes at clubs or anything, try to get the newbies with similar trees, especially if you can get them, 3 or 4 different, junipers. Junipers can be the same juniper or different types of junipers. Different types of junipers are fine. They still work about the same. You still have the same problems you have to work with, the same way of treating the green, pinching it, popping it off, cutting it, whatever it may be. Pines are, white pines, black pines, Monterey pines. They're still pines. There's still a general direction you're going in and a general shape you're looking for. Maybe not always a general shape, but close to it, especially for newbies. So if you're out there teaching new people, you need to make it easier for them. Don't make it too difficult. The worst thing you do is, well, let's get you started. Oh, there's a pine, there's an apple, there's a quince. Let's get these off the table. And, you could buy those or off the raffle table or whatever it may be. And there you're going home with a bunch of trees, and what are you going to do with them? Which one likes sun, which one doesn't like sun. You put it in a little more moisture, a little less moisture, a bigger pot, a smaller pot. So there's a lot of things to do. If we try to throw too much at somebody in the beginning, they're going to start losing trees because they can't handle all the different ones. They all take different climates, different lightness. And if they start losing them, you've lost that person, and you've lost maybe a little treasure, somebody who would have done real well with them if they'd been presented with the right trees to begin with. So what I was getting in Japan over here, I was doing that. I was growing all different trees. I mean, you just buy trees like crazy. I can't tell you what my yard looked like in the beginning. But it was really about learning. I went with pines. It just so happened that was the pine season started. And that's what I got in Japan, pines all the way through. And that month. And then the next month was something else again. And there were times of the year where we hit several different trees. It's not always just the same thing, but it made it so you ate, slept, drank, dreamt what you were doing, and you really got it, and so as students, if the people who are out there listening, if they're working with other people, if they're teaching other people, they need to be thinking about that. Don't make it too confusing for them in the beginning. Yes, they want different flowers, they want different colors, they want this. Make the colors in the pot then. Get a green pot, get a blue pot, get a violet pot, whatever it is. Make the color different there. But stay with 1 or 2 trees in the beginning, especially that first year. It takes time to really get it all in hand. If you just fill up your backyard, you're going to be putting a lot of dead wood out front. And it's hard to say that you don't want to do that. So.
Back to that spider, did you find it?
That spider.
Spider, did you ever find it? Or?
No, I found another 1 or 2. There were more of them. And it was spider time. They were out and running. A lot of the windows in Japan, doors were swung open. They had screens on them. Some did, some didn't. But they were all wide open during the summer. And the one time I fell over there, I took a really bad fall, and my knees have not been the same since. But they're really bad right now. Was when a typhoon came in, and there were many typhoons that came close and went south, just went north. This one decided to come right over. So I'd written about it in here. I had, we'd leave all the windows open so the cool breeze just ahead of the typhoon would come in and cool off the place. And then the minute the rain would start, and it was like, rain! And it was, you flew off out of your shoes, and I didn't have my socks on. It was the first day I went without socks, and I had bare feet, and it hit the wooden floor that was wet. I went running through the house, through the hallway, which wasn't wet yet. Mrs. Mitsuya was going to get that part. All of everything was blowing. Went through the living room, through the light kitchen area, and into my wing, and that was where I had to get it. And when I came off of the mat by the doorway in the wing, which was an indoor doorway. I hit that wood floor that was wet, and my knees went out to the side. I mean, my feet went out to the side, my knees came down, hit the floor, and rammed into that metal bar at the window where the screen was. I got the screens closed, and I sat there for a long time before I got up. And that's when I found where all the spiders were coming from. It happened for a reason. 15 minutes left. I can go over photos. Oh, photos. We haven't done photos. So.
Rearrange the camera.
That's Does this need to be twisted?
It's, no, it's fine.
You just leave this. Always, we'll handle it up here. Or you can.
Okay, well, once I find a spot, I can keep going it down. So we'll start moving, okay? So what we have in here, the first picture is John Naka. This was back quite a few years ago. In 94, November 94. So this was after I had completed my apprenticeship. So he had come back to the States. We had a convention in, I believe that was San Jose at the time. And so it was John Naka and my teacher, Mr. Mitsuya. So they were, I'm going to put this other photo over in front. It's a bad photo because there was no light coming at them. All the light was outside. And the two of them were just like little kids. They'd finally gotten back together and they're just chatting up a storm. Can you see it? Okay, so that was without light. Then when I flashed, went to put the flash on, John Naka turned and kind of looked right into it. And so he looks a little startled, but the two of them just went right back and started talking again, and they went forever. What do you need? I can turn this. Well, what are you trying to get out of?
That's good.
That's good. Okay, I'm going to leave my pen next to it, so I've got some sort of a station. Okay, now, as I mentioned, there were some good trees and some other trees. These are trees that were completed that were getting ready for kokufu. This was probably about 4 years into it. So this is his table. Is that set up right?
Hold on a little bit.
Well, we were into a different area, I thought.
Trying the best.
Okay, so this is a chochibai, a very, 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 very full one. You could not get this marker pen through the branches. It's that close. And it's kept that way. And it's been that way for years. It's beautiful. He doesn't get to keep it. It's one of the clients, but it comes to the house often. And it's won at kokufu twice, I believe now, over the years. But it's one of my favorite trees because it is so dense. It's so wonderful. It's so perfect. It's low, it's squat. You just want to crawl underneath and lay there and look at it from the underneath side, as Dennis Makashima would say. Okay. So another tree, this is a big beech. If I got that right here, that lined up about right?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, now I'll leave my pen there. Okay, so this, no, quit. Perfect means perfect. Okay, is that close or?
That's good, that's good, that's good.
Okay, so I'm using that pen. I'm going to do this upside down. That's what I'll do. So that'll tell me where the two go. Okay, so this beech, if you look at it, you're going to see the number of branches on it. Now, coming off of the trunk, there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, probably about 18 branches that come off the trunk. But the branches that initially come off the trunk are not extending out 7 or 8 inches and then the other branches starting. Our branches are never where they should be. So the one branch that comes out off the trunk, there may be one that has an extension that's about 4 inches long or 3 inches, but there's actually a back branch that comes off of it right at this point behind it. All the other branches start almost within the range of the trunk. So you've got your trunk, you have maybe an inch or so, sometimes a half an inch, before another branch starts off of that. So your secondary, your tertiaries, they just build and build and build. This particular tree does not have as many branches in the front as I would normally see on the ones that he's really done a lot of work on. So we're going to the next one. Now this is an upright tree, but so it might not fit as well. It's also a beech. Should I, let me move that up a little higher. Does that look good? Okay, here you can see in between, there's even a little branch here, but there are branches in between, a little space here and then more branches. So you get to see some of the beauty of the trunk and the trees. This first one I showed you has a much better tapering coming out on the branches where they're not full all the way to the outside edge of multiple branches coming off of it all over. This one has a much more refined, finer looking branch than the other one did. The other one was thicker to begin with, was cut back over a period of time and rebranched. This just has a different flavor to it. Notice all the little points coming around the edge. The beautiful, both of them have a very nice nabari. Notice the size, the shallowness of this pot. You look at the color of the pot, if you can tell. It's kind of a bronzy, greenish, brownish, tannish thing. Just multiple feelings, but how wonderfully that matches and shows up what? The buds. These are just deep buds going through wintertime. This would be the February show, Kokofu. And you can see how this pot just brings all that wonderfulness. It's close, it brings it together and gives you a nice feeling. But it's the beauty of the branches in the front that I really prefer on this tree.
Hold on 1 second, Kathy. I'm not sure whether anybody can see it.
And is it needs to go up or down?
Peter, look at this. Peter.
Hold that in.
Yes, not you.
Oh, switch camera. Oh, no.
Oh, I didn't switch camera. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, everybody. What do you?
So I can't bring it up higher or what?
No, you're perfect on my screen, but not on the Peach.
On the right side of the screen last time.
Oh, man. We need to get back into this.
What do I want? I don't know if I should show some of these.
You've done 5 minutes.
No, I wanted to get a couple of biggies here. There's one in particular I'm looking for, the home gym.
You just passed it.
No, not what I wanted.
Oh,
I want this tree. But I wanted it in a bigger, there it is.
Okay.
This is
Because we
actually,
don't have
to
time
me,
for
better
that.
because the frames.
Well, that's why I tried to pick up the better ones, but I didn't know how much time I was gonna have for art. That's a big one, bonsai. But, yeah.
That's how I did it.
Oh, video is muted.
Should show one of these.
And there she is. And Chad, I'm asking if it's for you here.
Can you turn the tree around?
Can I turn it around?
Yeah,
Which way?
just upside down.
This way?
Not
Or-
one side.
or-
Yeah, like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, I've got the same tree. This was a few years later. And this was at a different show, but just from an angle, are they able to see now?
Yeah, now we can see it.
Okay, so this is the same tree in the same pot, but just a different angle. We're looking at this now from the side. And I just wanted to show it to you. The trunk itself has a slight lean forward. So the viewer would be looking from this spot. Okay. I'm going to show some more.
Yeah, actually, they didn't see the first one either.
Which, oh, this one. So we're turning everything around? Is that right?
Yeah, upside down.
Okay. Does that fit right, or do I need to move it over more?
You're fine.
Okay. So this is the original, the first one that you missed. You can see how it has a much stronger branch system. It's not what I would call as refined, but different trees, you can have the same type of tree. You can have the same type of maple, but they grow differently. This one is just a shorter, a little more movement in the trunk line. So maybe it was influenced more by the winds and different things. And the other one maybe sat out in the front lawn of the White House or something and just had its way of growing straight up and well cared for and pruned. So that's the feeling you get when you're doing the tree. You don't always make everything totally upright. It depends on what you're trying to show, what you're accomplishing. And that one shows the difference. Here's another tree with a lot of fuzzy. Now this one was actually lime sulfur tip to toe during the winter time. This was done at that home gym, that big wonderful palace I told you about. This was a bonsai show that my teacher put on. He puts it on New Year's Day. Bloody cold out there because there's no windows. You just open the shutters up and you wear a lot of clothes. A lot of clothes like this. You can see I am stuffed. I am cold. I am shivering. And to show you another one, here is the boss hiding back in the corner, standing in the sun, just to get warm because he was inside for too long. So I'm going to change that out. Okay, now here is another. I don't know, every time you touch that, you just, this one, I'll have to scoot down a little bit. This is a toe show. One of my favorite trees. One of my teacher's clients' trees. A very tall tree. It tops out at 48 inches with this tip. But it's a beautiful tree. It's an elegant tree. And it's one that it could take you 2 days to really work this one out, to clean it up, to do what needs to be done because of the size of the tree. But it's one of my favorites. I always loved it when it came into the yard when we had time to work on it. So everything, and did we show this one yet?
Yeah, we did, but it didn't show.
It didn't show up, okay. So this little chochobai did not show up, so we'll get it back in place. I'll leave the little accent plant in there. This one, as I said, it's not very tall. You know, it's probably about 9-10 inches max high, but it is crammed full of wonderful little tiny twigs that come from the inside, and they just kind of move all over, all in the same, you know, direction. It's not like one is crossing over another, and you can't see easily because it's just starting. The little buds that are on it are just showing a little hint of pink or red. So this again is kokufu time. So this is set up in my teacher's work. This is in the workshop. This is the sideboard in the workshop, and it's just lovely. The tatami mats run across the top, nicely finished. So we're able to kind of semi-set a show to see what's going on, what looks good next to what, and what we need to do. And that's part of the way we would work it. Even with the crappy trees, we put down a little slab of some sort and put them up there if we needed to look at them to see how they look. Were they really giving the sense or the feeling we wanted? Here's, this is, I think, did we show you this one? It's a little small, but it's that wonderful elm. Oh, that's the elm. This is a different one. Okay. So this one is one of my favorite trees. It's actually about 2 feet tall, and just it's not losing any branches from the front. Their branches are 360 all the way around, and it's again hit with lime sulfur to make it look very white. What his feeling was on this tree is that it is in winter time when it's iced. So you're looking at the ice on the tree, and that's why he wants all of it very, very, very white. Okay, I've got another little, this is an accent, and it's nice because usually accents are interesting. It's in a, I don't necessarily care for the white bowl, but what he's trying to accomplish here, this was a very pretty piece for me. But the stone, it's a beautiful stone, but it's totally covered with a good quality lichen / moss. And they put it up as if it's just an island floating, and you get the feeling that maybe it's a volcanic island because of that little dip in the inside. So there's all sorts of wonderful feelings that you're going to get. Did we show the big tosho? This is inside that hongjin.
Wow.
That's one of my favorites. I loved what was there. I love the feeling of that place, to show it outdoors. Again, New Year's, it's just the beginning of the year, and it's a nice way to start it off. Here's another row, and my teacher, when he was crowded inside and trying to stay warm, he was back in that corner at the time, but the sun had changed then. But you can see here he's got a setup. So we set up outside. We set up all the tokonomas that are inside that building. They're all tatami mats, so you take your shoes off when you go in. You're walking on the tatami mats, but you leave your coat on. Now, I've got a couple other pictures here that are not, well, here's one, by the way. This was inside that same building. Here they are on the tatami mats, kneeling down, looking at the trees that they're on, you know, on the red carpet that we brought that in to set them on. And that's about the way they would be displayed if somebody was coming that was a very special, privileged person that would be staying there. They would bring good trees in, they would bring special items and set them down where they can enjoy them in the tokonoma space. They would sit there and have their tea. We sat there holding onto the teacups, trying to keep our fingers warm. So it was a different way, but it just gives you a sense of what it was like. Here is Mr. Mitsuya's son, Koji, the younger one. When he when he finished high school, I was still in Japan. And he wanted to study school. He was studying English. I had trouble with Japanese at one point. So I'll show you this picture. This is Koji in the States. This is after he'd been there about 2 or 3 years. He ended up going to an English language school for foreign students, which were mostly Japanese, but there were other people there too. Went there for a year, really got his voice down. He could write English. He couldn't speak it because his teacher didn't speak it. I found that out when I had trouble. They said, oh, call Koji's English teacher. He'd never been out of Japan. He didn't know English. He could write it. He couldn't speak it. So he had to come over here and learn it. And then he went to college, to the university over here. And he got his car. And so he was having fun over here while I was working in Japan. There's a different takeoff. So I wanted to show you Koji is one of the fun pieces. And here's another one. This is Hideko, Koji in the middle, and me. And this was, where were we? Would have been, oh, that was at Jack Dutro's, which is, Jack Dutro was one of our older, longer in the bonsai realm, but has since passed away. Hideko was the one that helped me in the beginning. Koji is in the middle at this point. I'm back home now, so that would have been 95. So that Koji had maybe another 2 years of college to go, and then went back. I have to tell you, my husband stayed home while I was in Japan. When Koji came, I didn't realize that while I was in Japan, my husband retired from work. So he had a lot to do. He bought things, paintings, books, everything you could think of. Just had a wild time, and sculptures and things. And then Koji came. And my husband had a son by a prior marriage. I can't get into all that. It was a difficult time. But I never saw him in the light of having a child. We wanted kids, we just couldn't have them. When Koji came, I saw this man I didn't know I'd married, and it still tickles me inside. Koji would come in with the same question 10, 15 times a day. And my husband would answer him and walk him through it just like he hadn't heard it before. And it just blew me away. I thought I would not have patience like that. I didn't think I would. But he's a delightful person. He now is able to go throughout the world. He works for a lot of different companies in different countries. And because he learned English, he's able to do that. And I haven't seen him for a long time. I was there at his wedding, well, both their weddings, him and his brother. So I actually ended up giving him away to his wife.
Oh, you did? Oh.
Yeah, I didn't know it. I didn't know what was happening. He said, give her this, you know. I was being coached from the side. So getting into bonsai, anybody that wants to teach, you know, it doesn't matter. You learn more when you start teaching. So even if you're newer, you find somebody else who maybe is excited about learning, and you find a partner that's either a little bit newer than you are or knows a little bit more than you do, but you work things out together and play with it. And I'll, you know, as a group, I've never met such a wonderful group of people as I have bonsai people. I mean, I used to show dogs when I was younger, all over the country. And no offense, but I'm glad I am where I am. I mean, I saw a lot of funny stuff going on, a lot of nasty stuff, but in general, in bonsai, just doesn't get any warmer than the people you're around. So, anyway, there's so much more to talk about, fun things to say, but I'm glad we had this beginning outlet. Thank you. Thank you for what you put into that. I appreciate it. I mean, you've done a lot of background work and you've got a lot more ahead of you, and I'll be interested to see what happens.
So there's one more question. Did you
Sure.
paint the beach?
In a way, it was painted with lime sulfur, a very strong lime sulfur, not like we get over here. So you put the lime sulfur on, you make sure that the soil area is totally hydrated before you do the lime sulfur. You put plastic all over everything down at the soil line, and then you paint the lime sulfur on it. You let it dry. When it dries, you turn the whole pot to the side. So you're lifting it up like you would be lifting this up, and the tree's sticking out this way, and you hose everything off of it. You want the sulfur to get off of the tree. The sulfur is the damaging part. The lime will adhere and stay, and that's what gives you the white. And that's what he wanted. He wanted a tree that looked like it was basically coated in ice, very cold, and that was the feeling. Even though when it was shown at Kokufu, it's February, and it happened to be snowing one of those years when we did show it. But it gives you that feeling of absolute winter, very cold, and it really shows off the branches. You know, it's not just a trunks thing. It's the branches. And then it stays on the tree for quite some time and gradually wears off. And then when you're ready for another big show, you give it another application. Okay, any other questions?
Yep, there's actually not a question. It's a beautiful tree, Hiromi says. And also there is one from William. Bill Vala.
Oh yeah, Valvanis, Bill.
I just found a photo of Kathy's Shojubai bonsai from Kokufu 10. If you want it, I can share it.
Yeah.
I don't know how. Yeah, so we can share it. So
Sure.
yeah, we can do that. Big Bill. So okay. And
Thank you, Bill.
yeah.
Well, we're having a little technical difficulties with making Bill giving him screen share privileges.
I think you have to make him a co-host.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could make him a co-host, and we have that.
Yeah, he should be a co-host.
More.
Yeah, try that. It usually shows up in a key with people, and you click on them, it's just like a smartphone. Then you see a menu. Can't see anything.
Yeah, I already have. I have him here, but I can't make him co-host.
Kathy, not everyone's going to be able to make it to Japan and replicate your experience there, but for those who want to learn any art or the art that you've learned, can you describe, your relationship to your clients, to your colleagues in clubs, and how this institution, the Bonsai Garden at Lake Merritt, provides an environment for this kind of learning?
Well, it's a great environment for the learning here at the garden because we have many different types of trees and the availability to work on them. And there are people, especially certain days, we'd like to have it all the time. It just hasn't quite worked out that way yet. But we have very qualified people that come in here and work, and if somebody is in, need of good quality training, this is certainly an excellent place to go. One, you'll learn how to work on trees that are either, if you don't have trees at home, you have trees here to work on that will give you a feeling for what you need to be doing and why you need to be doing it that way, or what type of trees you really enjoy working on. You get to work on some. There's somebody near you that's helping you out with a tree when you first get started. You're under their wings, so to speak, and you start picking up what to do, and then you through this working on different trees, you find out what kind of tree do I really like working on? What do I like? What would I like in my yard? What would I like to own if I don't have any yet? So it's a good starting point and ending point for a lot of people. We have great trees out in the yard. And as you start to move up the ladder, so to speak, you're learning how to work with different material. And then in that way, you're going to learn what you do like to work with and what you don't like to work with. Maybe people don't like to get bloodied hands. They don't like to work with needle junipers. They don't like getting stuck all the time. Others like, oh, well, okay, we'll do it this time. But there is truly it's a lovely way to find what you like and what you don't like. So you don't bring something home, go buy something because it looks pretty, but you find out you don't like working with it. So find out here, and we have a good group of people that are opened up. I mean, we tried classes. They're difficult. It's again, I think the classes many times have to be with individuals outside the area, and classes that may be through clubs. They have some classes so they can start off low key that way and get a little better feeling for it. But down here, I found when I went to Japan, they didn't put a little crappy tree in front of me for the first day. They gave me something that just blew me away. Oh my God, you're going to let me touch this? Not that I couldn't, but I wasn't sure myself. But within a few minutes or an hour, he had me feeling very comfortable about what I was doing. He was doing the same thing. I was doing it. She was doing the same kind of tree. I was doing the same kind of tree. And they would give you some light instructions, and I mean very light instructions, and then you would just follow. You might hear or something. But it wasn't, and you got your hand cracked once in a while, but it wasn't impossible to learn. You just have to be ready to do it and have the time to do it and not be in a rush. The worst time to work on a tree is when I got 5 minutes, let me get something done. Because you're not going to be thinking about what you're doing. You're just going to be thinking about taking something off. And so you need to have the time. And in a place like this, when there are other people around, it's easy to have the time because you're coming here. This is a destination. You're going to see lovely trees, but you can watch other people work on different trees. And then you will very shortly, especially if it's when Gary's around, get handed a tree and said, here, do this. And I think pretty close to watching what they're doing. But it's, there's nothing like getting started. I never look back. From the day I started, it was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this thing existed. How did it start? It started, I went down to it was kind of there was different things done different seasons at a community center. And I went down there, I did cooking classes, I did this, I did that, I did different things. And somewhere along the line, they had something about learn to do your trees in the Japanese manner. Well, what really kicked me off and made me think, oh, boy, that might help me. I had planted, well, I had a bare landscape when we bought the house. So I planted this wonderful black pine. on the front corner of my yard, and I put a little hill on it, and I kind of knew enough about, you know, shaping landscape and rather than having just flat ground. And I liked this tree, and it was growing, and somewhere down the line, I heard or read something about, you know, when you start to shape a tree, you need to put a wire around the branch. So I went into the house and got a couple coat hangers and undid them, took them apart, and I put that around that big branch and bent it down a little bit because I saw this picture of a pond underneath and all that other stuff. And I thought, oh, I could do that with my tree. So I got involved into this thing at the community center. And it was something about learn how to do your trees in a Japanese manner. I don't really remember. And somebody else came to, there were several of us that went to that class. Well, it turned out to be what I'd call bonsai instead of bonsai. It was just little ticky-tacky stuff. You get a little weed, you get a little plant, you get a little something and throw it in a pot. And they were never bigger than that or thicker, oh, half that. But it was just something. And there was one gal in the class that knew something about bonsai. She knew there was a club. She knew something. So we started asking the teacher, is there a club around we can go? Oh, no. And finally she'd say something like, you don't want to go there. They're just old fogies. They don't want to, you know, blah, blah, blah. So when she finally told us where the space was, Alec and I took off and went to it. Well, it was at this big community center, and we went upstairs. We're supposed, you know, whatever it was she told us to do, went up and started, and where's the bonsai group? Where's the bonsai? Shh, you know, and they were having a fit because they were doing something called bingo. Oh. You don't bother bingo people. I didn't know that. I'm just trying to find out where we went. So we left. And it was a couple months later when she gave us the right address and we went to it. And the day I walked in there was the day that changed my life. And it was Ben Rosette came up to me at the door and he says, hi, I'm your new buddy. And I think by the way, every club needs to do this. When a new person walks in, you have someone lined up waiting for a new person, somebody who's good, generous, that talks to you and says, hi, this is Sandy. Sandy says, blah, blah, blah. Hi, this is Jerry. And the next time I come, you remember Jerry, we talked to him last time. I'm really bad on names. I have a horrible time with names. But I did learn the names of the people in that club because for months, every time I came in, he would check me. Hi, you remember? We did. Last month, so-and-so was teaching. This month we have, and it just went on and on and on. And so we just made total commitment. By the way, Ben was a survivor from the concentration camp. Still had his number on his wrist. The most delightful person you'd ever want to know, and his wife too. I'm sorry they're gone now. But you don't know who you're going to meet at a bonsai club. And they're
Hey! What are you doing? Come here.
Yes.
That's Bill.
Oh, is that? I'm thinking it's somebody upstairs in the attic.
So I have him talking, but I can't get him sharing his screen somehow, right? So that we can see that picture. But anyway.
Okay.
He has to do it.
Yeah, we tried that too.
Okay.
Well,
Bill, at least I heard your dog.
That quince was very famous in 2018 at Coco Futen.
Oh, it was there in 18? I missed that. I haven't been there for a while.
Mr. Mitsuya was very proud of it.
Yeah. Well, I love the tree. I just have always loved that tree. Well, there's several. Well, there's still a lot of them. Yeah.
So,
It's a lot of work.
So there's many more things here, right?
yeah. So,
I'm taking all this offline, right? You're offline?
Yeah.
I'm really glad I was able to hear more of this story. And I also know there is more to this story. And I had no idea there would be so much to this story. So
Yeah, I only gave you the first month and a half, 2 months.
I know there's diary and more scrapbooks.
Well, this whole this part here, if I read page by page, and there were some really good things to talk about that were in here.
Overall, though, it really comes through what it takes to be a good student, and what it takes to be good students, what it takes to be a good teacher. And along the way, I can't believe it, but your two families somehow blended. And they took you in, and your husband took their son in, and you know people up and down the state, and Bill Valvanis is on the East Coast running a similar operation out there, and we all know each other and enjoy being with each other, and we learn a whole lot. And I enjoy being with these trees because it said, you know, the world in a grain of sand. And if you live in a condo and all you've got's a balcony, well, this little juniper can take you back to, you know, the crest of the mountains. So thanks for giving us just a little taste of what it's like to be a student and to be a teacher.
So very many people say thank you very, very much, Kathy, and people say you had a great experience. Even Japanese can't have this traditional kind of apprenticeship kind of experience, and everybody says thank you, and thank you to the crew, and whoever put it all on, thank you, thank you, thank you. And so we'll be back at 2 o'clock, I think, right?
Yes, we have an event at 2, and everyone has that link, and we're looking forward to that. And I want to thank my wife, Sibylla Dreyer, who's taken over as production
Especially
master.
with this thing.
Okay, so see you all in a half hour. See you all back.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Kathy.
Oh, you're welcome.
Go.
Thank you, Kathy Shaner, for an engaging presentation. Thanks to the original webinar audience for their provocative questions and shared knowledge. The conversation afforded the chance to imbibe the lecture information and form connections with like-minded people. And thank you too to the Japanese people who over generations developed the life and living environment that's the subject of these webinars, and who've generously shared this gift with the world. Thank you to the many artists, craftsmen, authors, and organizations worldwide and here in the USA who've made this known, notably the North American Japanese Garden Association, NAJCA, Bonsai and Suiseki clubs, Japan-US Sister City Associations, and notably Tsukiya Living Magazine, which shows and tells how the Tsukiya-style living environments in tangible essence may be realized all over the world with a diversity of tangible materials and forms. Thanks as well to the Japan Foundation Center for Global Partnership for financial support and the Oakland Fukuoka Sister City Association for producing these webinars.